the argument that was made was, well, pro-choice, it's your choice, just choose not to do it. Well, that's not good enough for me, because we don't make that kind of exception for any other form of homicide. We don't say like murder is statistically rare, therefore if you don't want to murder people, just don't murder people. That's obviously not the kind of like moral injunction that we put up against our society.
I don't care about your friend of a friend that grew up in foster care that is grateful that they're alive. I know people in my own personal life that grew up in foster care and have been like, if my mom would have gotten an abortion, I would have been like abused, raped, like passed around like 37 different fucking foster homes or whatever. Like, I don't care about your individual experience. I care about the people in foster care that are like horrifically abused because the people were forced to give birth to them when you could just prevent all of these atrocities from happening in the first place. But please tell me about your friend of a friend. I'm really interested.
There will be more black people if we ban abortion. That is based and great.
Yeah, that's how they outbreed the whites.
Not your responsibility to determine how black families
exactly.
That's
the
bottom line here.
They should be determining this.
Welcome,
the
everyone.
Real leftist infighting.
The real leftist infighting. Happy to have you all here, for you all to spend a Friday with me, Dylan Burns, for the Hippy Dippy Roundtable, live from Ukraine, Ukraine edition. Happy to have you all here as you're taking time out of your days to do this. So, what I'm going to start with is have everybody introduce themselves. We're going to go into the rules, and then we're going to start with the first topic, because I know we have a few new people here, so I want to make sure they can introduce themselves. So we're going to start with counterpoints. How you doing, counterpoints? By the way, I've been playing some Warhammer stuff recently, so you've converted me. Congratulations.
Fuck yeah, another one bites the dust. I love it. My name's Connor. I run a YouTube channel named Counterpoints. I identify as center right. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, so I have about 3,000 points of Warhammer stuff in this bookcase in my background. That's actually some Warhammer art right there that I commissioned from Oramus Juicy on Twitter. He's a very talented artist. So if you're into any of that kind of stuff, go ahead and check us out. We just broke 25K on YouTube, so we're actually having a lot of fun and kicking ass, taking names, et cetera, et cetera. And then I do want to shout this out. Kevin was saying that nobody needs Danabo. I need Danabo. He's a good dude. And I'm going to go ahead and pledge $200 because Danabo's family is going through a rough time right now. He's traveling in order to basically see his family while they're having that rough time. So any donos from my chat tonight will be going to Danabo to help him out during this tough time for him. But he's a good duder despite being a Brit bonger. And I'll leave it there.
Well, I was just going to say, this is how Brit bongers help each other out. That was me being nice.
Talking shit.
Absolutely. Okay, well, now that he's done that, okay, I feel a little bit shown up, so I'm going to join him and do the same thing. I'll pledge $200, and any donations tonight, we'll throw it towards Danabo as well. Danabo's a great guy, and he is going through a tough time right now. So I'm going to throw it over now to Kevin Logan.
Hello, I'm Kevin Logan, and I like to verbally abuse people who've been through bad times recently. Clearly. Now, I'm a leftist from the UK. You can find me at KFLogan1875 on Twitch or Twitter or whatever, I don't know. Or you could just not, whatevs.
Fantastic. I'm going to throw it now over to Madam. Should I just call you Madam, or what should I call you?
Genevieve works. Madam is fine as well, but Genevieve is maybe a little bit more personal.
Okay, fantastic.
I am a liberal, sex-positive feminist. I've recently gotten into political debating in the past month and a half, roughly, regarding things generally around equal rights, sex work, so on and so forth. And I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me. You can find me on twitch.tv/Madam Genevieve or Twitter, Madam_Genevieve.
Fantastic. Happy to have you. We also have another person who's new as well. Mr. Peppers. Should I just call you Peppers?
It's actually Goddammit Malcolm. This is the only thing that I haven't changed. So Malcolm's fine, or Pepper,
Fine.
whatever you prefer.
Fantastic.
Whatever you guys prefer.
Thank you, George. Introduce yourself.
I'm Malcolm, Goddammit Malcolm on everything. I'm a trans guy. I talk about trans issues through like a trans masculine perspective because there's not very many of us floating around on the ethers of the internet. Yeah, and I appreciate everybody's time and the opportunity to hang out with you guys. It means the world to me.
Happy to have you. And now we're going to throw it over to Taftaj.
All right, I'm Taftaj. I'm moderately right-wing. I do internet politics. I post cringe on the internet daily, so if that interests you, you should follow me.
But be warned, she does not only post cringe on her Twitter account.
I also post sexy pictures on Twitter.
She does do that. We're now going to
It's
throw
true.
it over to Turk.
Someone sent me a very risque one the other day. Yeah.
Of me?
Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. I can't show that on stream, obviously.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, I don't know how to follow that, but I'm Turk. I stream science and tech. I've been doing more of these politics streams lately. I'm a conservative Christian, so this should be an interesting discussion. I'm really interested to see the different angles that we talk about all this types of stuff. And
Hey, Turk, you're the science and tech guy, so are you sure that's your mic?
yes.
Okay, this is 100% your mic?
You might want to use push to talk if you have the
Is that
option.
better?
Tap your mic. Tap it.
No,
No,
that's
you're not using
you're
your
not
mic.
using the mic. No. Detective.
I pushed to talk. Did it reset?
Tap your mic. When you tap it, we don't hear. So that means you're
Yeah, I'm on
another
push to
mic.
talk.
Oh, okay.
You
well-
don't have two hands. What? Okay.
Okay, we'll get back to that later. Okay, we're gonna throw it over to. Do I just call you True?
Yeah, that's good. True is good.
Fantastic.
Hi everybody. I'm True Malma. I used to do these shows a lot. I took a long break, so because I'm a centrist and apparently I go against everybody most of the time. My positions tonight, I don't really hear people talk about it, but apparently it's libertarian. So yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes, and I hope we have a good conversation. And maybe we can move the conversation further ahead. That would be really my goal, to be honest.
Okay, so I'm gonna go into the rules of the show. The first rule is you don't do anything against Twitch terms of service. Obviously, we all want to keep our channels. Nobody wants to lose their channel, so we're not going to break Twitch terms of service. Second rule is do your best not to yell over everybody else or shout over everybody else. Like you can do some, but at a certain point, we will stop you if it's difficult to move the conversation along. The third rule is during intro and outro segments, you don't interrupt other people. We want everybody to be able to say at least their opening and ending statements each topic, so people have a period of time to be uninterrupted in what they say. When I'm talking, there's nobody else talking. I'm not talking because I want to give my position. I'm just trying to moderate the panel. I'm not trying to, tell you all about my hot take abortion topic. Okay, that's you guys tonight. Besides that, you will talk to people with their proper pronouns. If you don't like that, I don't care what you do in your own show, but this is my show. And okay, I think that's all of the rules. And so we're going to open up with, I think there was some big news recently, so we're going to talk about that. Roe versus Wade. So my question to the group is, obviously, after the decision was leaked a few months ago, or I think maybe it just was a month ago, we all kind of knew this was coming in the near future. We thought it was going to be 6-3, ended up being 5-4, the decision. My question is, how do you think this Roe versus Wade being overturned is going to affect the country? How do you think it's rolling out? And how are you reacting to the recent news? Basically, it's a general topic on Roe versus Wade. So I'm going to throw it over to, I think I'll go Taft first.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah, I'll just start by saying that these topics are sort of difficult to have because you end up discussing Roe v. Wade on a lot of different levels, sort of at the same time. So I'll just try to quickly address what I think are like the three levels in which people talk about it. And first is the legal level. So I'm of the opinion that Roe v. Wade was poor legal ruling. And from the standpoint of constitutional law, it probably makes sense to overturn it. The only problem here is that it gets into a little bit of dicey territory when you start overturning really old cases. But I think Roe v. Wade is one case where that's justifiable just because there's so much division on it. So that's the first level. Second is the moral level. I don't believe that abortion is immoral. Even if I grant that fetuses are persons, I believe killing is sometimes morally justified, and abortion is one of those cases. There's a wealth of sociological literature which suggests that access to abortion has positive social effects, namely on reduction in violent crime. So personally, if I had my own state and were writing laws, I would allow abortion access. But then a third, I think, is the federal policy level. I don't think that federal government should issue countrywide bans or protections for abortions. most of the men and women in red states where abortion is being restricted actually are in favor of those restrictions. And I think if you want to organize a community and ban abortion within or after a certain amount of time, as long as those laws are within the bounds of the Constitution, I think that community should be able to. The ability for people to self-organize into communities of like-minded individuals is really a strength of federalism, and it's something that's bounded by the right to exit at any time. So that's sort of my position on what I think are the 3 relevant levels of the abortion discussion.
Okay. I'm now going to throw it over to Kevin Logan.
Yeah, I think this is a genuinely awful decision. It sets a phenomenally bad precedent and opens the floodgates for any number of other rights for American citizens to be stripped away. The Supreme Court has essentially turned itself into a 6-person theocratic council, which gets to just decide what rights people have. They're clearly, given Clarence Thomas's notes on this, he's stated openly that he thinks they should go back and look at things like gay marriage and contraception, etc., etc. And this is what they're going to do from now on, it appears, is essentially leak ahead of time their plans. People will then say, don't worry, they're not actually going to do that, and then go ahead and fucking do that and strip away people's rights. It's a genuinely worrying precedent, and I fear for the direction of America.
Throw it over to Turk.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with a lot of the basis Taj said, but I don't agree on the moral grounds. As a Christian, I believe in pro-life stances, but I do believe that there is a necessity for allowing certain exceptions to apply, because there's situations which people don't volunteer to be part of that entire process. They shouldn't have to be forced to partake in the entire process. However, I do agree, though, that in those instances, they could give the kid away for adoption or some other form of non-lethal method for the infant child to be, a functioning person of society. But I agree. I think federalism is a great thing. I believe the media and the Democratic establishment have twisted the narrative in a way that is both toxic as well as disingenuous to the actual facts of the case. And I really wish people understood more about what federalism is, what that actually means, all the violence that's going on in Washington, California, New York. Those are states that still allow for abortion for pretty extensive pieces of time. So I'm really interested to see the different angles people want to talk about it, and really interested to see where it goes.
Okay, now we're going to throw it over to counterpoints.
Yeah, so the impact, as far as I can tell, is going to be like how it affects the country long term. These are kind of my predictions, however dog shit they are. Please feel free to hold me accountable to them in the future. I think conservatives are going to overplay their hands on the state level. So, for instance, like we're already seeing that in Mississippi and Louisiana, where they don't even have exceptions for rape and incest. They literally just have health of the mother as the only exception for an abortion. So I think that's going to be an overplay, and we're going to see some horror stories coming out of red states where people either have incest or rape stories and can't get access to an abortion. They fly out of state, they get harassed by law enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's going to happen in the red states. And then I'm also worried about a blue state backlash where they're basically like, oh yeah, 8.5 months viable pregnancy, who gives a shit? And then that's just going to deepen the propaganda on both sides to even worse, like partisan splits than we already have. Then, I think this is going to radicalize purple states in particular. I live in Florida, and Florida, we already see like a Roe versus Wade pushback where Democrats seem to be energized. So we might see some of the active like Republican swing that we would be expecting for the midterms get blunted by Roe versus Wade getting passed. So we might actually see the Democrats not necessarily like maintain their majorities, but they might be able to blunt what would typically be Republican momentum. And then going forward, I think there's probably like a 50-50 shot of Democrats breaking the filibuster in order to pass like a federal abortion protection legislation. I don't think it's going to happen, but they technically could. But then I'm worried about that opening up the floodgates where at that point, if they break the filibuster in order to pass federal abortion legislation, then at that point, we only need a 51-49 vote at the Senate in order to pass law. And I think that's going to seesaw the country into an even worse partisan split than we already are. So, could be fun. I think we're a little fucked and not in a good way.
Okay, now I'm gonna throw it over to Malcolm.
I think that the overturning of Roe v. Wade is kind of like Kevin was talking about, going to be a slippery slope into a whole bunch of like terrible shit, kind of setting the precedent that we can look at older cases and kind of overturn them, kind of how they're kind of alluding to going for gay marriage next and contraception. I think that's a big bad. I think that on the morality issue of abortion, even the Bible in Genesis talks about life beginning at first breath. I think as far as it's concerned, I know that counterparts brought up the idea of kind of like the idea of medical necessity, where there are states that aren't making any of these exceptions for like the health of the mother or in cases of like incest or rape. I think that anybody who is reasonable thinks that this is absolutely fucking ridiculous. And within the context of like life-saving medicine, I think that we're all pretty familiar with the American healthcare system being really slow at approving medically necessary treatments. So if you have a woman who has like an ectopic pregnancy or something and she's going to die, kind of going through the process in order to get that abortion, she might as well just die waiting for that to happen. Overall, I think kind of the overturning of this sets a really scary precedent that we're going to go back to all these rulings and revisit them in a really negative way. And then a lot of people are going to die. A lot of people are going to be in jail. And a lot of people are just going to have a lower quality of life just because of this decision. And yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to throw this over to, I guess it's true.
Okay. Fuck. You guys said so much. There's so much to bounce off of. Well, my position is that it is murder. But it should be legal. I think what's happening right now with Roe v. Wade, I went to look up because I'm Canadian, so it's very different for us here. But so I went to check about the law and why what happened. And I guess I understand why they overturned Roe v. Wade, but at the same time, I do feel like there's enough talented people in the world to make the case for a better case, because basically they chose to do Roe v. Wade. It was like in Texas, which was one of the most like toughest laws on abortion. And if you would instead go about it in a different way, I think there's a way to ratify it and like to protect the mother over the baby in the law, and for it, even if it's murder, to be like legal. But I feel like if it's just people butting heads, we'll never get there. Like here in Canada, like people do think it's a baby, but we can still abort them. The thing is, like, I think people are just more careful not to get pregnant because they know that it's a baby. So I think maybe that's why a lot of people get like butt heads a lot. I feel like everyone's trying to be overly radical to make their points instead of seeing that in the middle. We're able to agree on a lot more than it seems. Like even in this conversation here, there's not really a full on like pro like you're gonna have your rape baby like in the room. So I don't know. I think there's ways to move further ahead than we are, and I feel like politicians don't want us to do that. They want us to keep fighting on this very basic moment in time, and like I think we should break away from that and keep it legal. That's what I
Genevieve?
think.
Oh, Genevieve?
Hi, thanks. As True mentioned, there has been a lot brought up. Obviously, Taft talked about it kind of on a 3 different level basis, and I think that's really accurate. There are so many different ways this conversation can go, and a lot of you have made really valid points so far. I believe, along with the majority of Americans, as most studies have shown, that abortion should be accessible and safe. And I think that it does come down to the idea of, is it a life or is it a potential life? And at what point do we make that distinction? And the existing determinations of Roe v. Wade and then Casey that came later did allow for a balance for states to look out for the interest of this potential life while still allowing, for women to have access to abortion at the very least up to a certain point. And again, I think that that's something that most people do agree on is that, at least in the beginning, it's not as much of a debate if somebody is getting an early abortion. A lot of people will feel better with that because it's not as much of a viable life at that point. I think that it's also important to recognize that cellular life on the same conversation, cellular life is very different than a viable organism. So while we would be killing alive cells, I think that looking at it as murder is not really the best terminology or phrasing. There are obviously instances where we kill things and it's not murder, and I think this is definitely one of them. I think that this ruling is going to have a lot of dangerous consequences, and it was done in a way that is going to make the burden of seeking out this healthcare more difficult for women who are already disenfranchised. And I think that that's something that really needs to be addressed as well.
Johnny Scarlett.
Hey, what's up? Hi, if no one's ever seen me before, my name is Johnny. I'm an educational streamer, and we talk about things like philosophy and consciousness and AI on a regular basis. Because of that, abortion comes up a fair amount, and I've done a fair amount of research into what someone who does, for instance, neural networking might call the shape of consciousness. It's about input-output feedback loops. And so the capacity to have that ability, that feedback loop ability, grows exponentially over time when a fetus is gestating, right? So we have something where we might have to have a tiered morality system, a medically individualized morality system for people who are seeking a medical situation where they might be getting rid of a baby, where they might be aborting a baby that's not going to come to term alive. Because of this, I believe that approximately 10 to 15 weeks into the gestation process of a fetus is an appropriate time for an abortion, regardless of whether that baby will come to term eventually. And of course, again, that grows exponentially as we get into the input ability of that fetus. As it grows, we think about it differently. And I think that tiered morality scale needs to be a little bit more common in medical situations like this. And I think I'll stop it here because it seems like a lot of people have already said some of the more obvious stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you all for coming for this pretty big topic. So we've allotted a lot of time for this. It's now an open discussion. Anybody can start us off. I'll only interfere if it gets really out of hand. Good luck.
So I want to address at the top Malcolm's claim that in the Bible it says God breathed air into them, and that's when life happens. That is when Adam's life started, because he was created from the ground and the earth that was below him. And then whenever Eve was created and then they sinned and the fall of man happened, then they were told to go forth and multiply, not you're going to breathe more air and create more people. They're going to start creating more people through the procreation process.
He might be mistaking it for the Talmud, which does say that like pretty literally.
Yeah, so Genesis 2:7, Job 33:4, and Ezekiel 37:4-5 all talks about how life is created and breathed into every individual
Psalm
by God.
139, for you were formed in my inward parts, you were covered me in your mother's womb. Babies are created before they are actually put into the world.
I'm just going to stick with the big man and agree that life begins at first breath. I'm just going to stick with the big man on that one.
Well,
I know that's a Jewish
Wait,
I don't know about Christianity, though.
That's a false teaching.
Please, oh no. Please, okay, wait.
Heresy.
I want to stop. Okay. hey, we're all a little heretical tonight, okay? We're on the Hippy Dippy show. But I want to make sure that Turk has some time to respond. I want to make sure I could hear what he had to say.
No, I mean, it's what he's speaking is false teachings. It's not in the way it's interpreted. There's plenty of other passages in the Bible that refer to a child that's in the womb being created by God for a purpose, and that child is meant to be a creation. It's not only a creation once it's been born into this world, and that's why, as a Christian, killing that baby is a act of murder, and it's ending of a life.
Well, do you think that there were pregnant? Wait, hang on. Do you think that there were pregnant women on the earth when God flooded it?
Yes, there were.
Oh, it sounds like God is pro-abortion based. Next argument.
No,
Can I just say,
And
I
I
don't,
can just
look,
interject here. I don't know why we're even
Conversation
having
went far.
biblical or other
Yeah, it's sort of a
religious
separate
arguments here. It's
conversation
absolutely
theologically.
not. That's not a valid argument when we're talking about something that is really.
I think
stems from
maybe a
religion.
more interesting conversation might be the conversation around federalism and the role of the federal government in sort of legislating this morality. Because I and Turk take maybe the more controversial opinion that it's okay if certain communities institute rules as long as they're bounded by the Constitution and as long as they don't prevent people from leaving those states or those communities. It's okay for them to legislate morality within there and, live in accordance to their own beliefs.
how do you
I agree
feel
with
then
that.
about the elements of some of these laws that make extraterritoriality a part
I think
of
that's
it?
really bad. So, I know in Texas, it's been discussed that, you create sort of punishments for people who try to leave the state. I think that's probably a pretty dangerous road, and would be good. It'd be like an appropriate place for the government to step in and say that, no, you can't bound people's movement. So, yeah.
It's gonna hurt them politically anyway to be doing this. So.
But I think that the big thing that people need to understand, if you're a woman or a man in a very liberal blue state, it can be hard to conceptualize just how conservative everyone is in these towns. I grew up in rural America and I live in Texas now. And I know a lot of women who are very pro-life, right? So when you go to these red states, you meet women who are making these arguments for pro-life and not for, pro-choice. And it's not this great tyranny if a very conservative state like Mississippi institutes restrictions on abortion. Because
Hang on, so you're just going to the tyranny of the majority then?
Well, I think that
Democracy.
tyranny is still bounded by
because
exit.
most people in Mississippi don't like abortion, then everyone's rights in Mississippi get stripped.
It's not just most people; it's the vast majority of people.
Doesn't matter.
It's also not a protected right.
I do think it matters because ultimately the extent to which tyranny can be applied by the state is bounded by people's right to exit the state. So at the worst it could possibly be for a liberal woman in Mississippi is that she ends up moving. That's the worst it can be for her.
What about if a lot of people in Mississippi are very poor. What about if they can't afford to fucking move?
Or if
Yeah,
it's
which
one of
is
those
true,
life-threatening situations where she's got to get it right now and doesn't have time
Yeah,
to
I mean, these things may
F-150 jet to
happen,
another
But I
state.
think
Right?
it's this is the inevitable consequence of any law, right? Where sometimes you're going to have negative effects. And I will also acknowledge, I think that instituting restrictions on abortions are going to have bad effects in red states. That's my guess, is that sociologically, you're going to see a lot of crime. You're going to see a degradation of the society within these red states. And I think it's going to result in a lot of exodus. I think it's going to result in young women not coming to the state in the first place because they don't want to deal with that. And I think these are all bad consequences, which might even push me out of the state. But I think that if states and communities want to accept these bad results in, purpose of serving this specific moral goal, I think that that's the beauty of federalism is that you can do that. You can suffer the consequences. Your state can decline in popularity, and you take that on the chin. And the liberal.
No, but you're asking some of the most vulnerable people in America to take it on the chin for your philosophical approach.
A lot
to
of these
government?
people are very pro-life.
Yeah, but lots of them aren't. Lots of them aren't as well. It doesn't matter that the majority want to strip the rights away from the minority.
I don't think that we can legislate based on what you believe minority is the just moral action, because anyone can make that argument.
I think
conservatives will
bodily
make the
autonomy
same.
is quite important.
I know, but conservatives will make the same argument. Well, they'll say that even if liberals had a majority, they still believe that things should be pro-life, right? They'll make the exact same argument.
Okay, well, look, if they don't want to get an abortion, don't. Fine. I've got no problem. I'm not trying to impose any shit on them. They're the ones trying to impose shit on everyone else.
I think you're missing the point of their
means-
argument.
A right to choose means that you have a choice, that you have a choice to drink, that you have a choice to get an abortion.
But you don't have a choice to murder someone else. So that's the problem with their reasoning, is that you don't have an infinite right to bodily autonomy. Your right to bodily autonomy is bounded by the effects of what that autonomy results in. So that's the conservative argument. And it really fundamentally, it is just a values difference here.
And instead of, and other than the instances of rape and incest, usually women have the right to choose who they have intercourse with. And that's a very important thing that most women should take into account, knowing the consequences of that action.
I think women and men in general should be aware of the
Yes,
consequences
both sides
of their
are
actions,
equally
and I think
accountable.
that
Yeah.
a lot of people who are pro-choice are also big advocates for abortion being like your plan C, essentially. Not a lot of people who do advocate for the right to abortion are looking at it like that's the first option to controlling reproducing, right? Like people are going to use contraceptive of some sort most often. That's not always 100% safe. There can be accidents. There are emergency contraceptives afterwards, literally plan B and the like. And then an abortion would be after you've kind of exhausted those options.
Well,
So
two
it's
things.
like responsibility
Wait, one
for
second.
who
I
you're
want
sleeping with.
to make sure Johnny Scarlett gets to talk because Johnny Scarlett was trying to say something earlier.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have we talked yet about what the actual dissent from the court said about this being a right? Because everything that I read in the dissent said that it's not a right essentially not because of the privacy thing, although the privacy, it sort of teeters on an edge, I would say, but it also involves something that's historical to the country, historical to the values or the overall just culture of our country. And so has anyone talked yet about possible, as I think it was True Mama was saying, about taking different directions into a new alternative to Roe v. Wade, wherein we would decide this based on a historical ability to have abortions in this country that has been taken away and given back at certain points, and how that's affected us historically.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about that for sure. Like when you read, when I read Alito's opinion, a month ago, and how it's been worked into the majority of opinion of the court, one of the arguments that he makes is that access to abortion, universal access to abortion as a right, is not something that's rooted in our common law tradition and history. And
that is true, but the actual act of abortion has been historical to every culture, frankly, since Egypt. So that's part of where it went wrong, I think, is where in Roe v. Wade, they actually had historical accounts, but they were historical accounts from different countries altogether. And so I think now at this point in our country's history, we probably have the ability to collect better data on our actual historical situation in America.
It's
well, and our history is like not
lots
the
of
best.
people engaged in abortion, but like in regards to the legality of it, they're looking at whether or not the laws, criminalize it or not.
I'm not saying you're being disingenuous, but I think a lot of conservatives are, when they pretend that these 6 theocratic lunatics actually looked at the law and decided in a completely dispassionate fashion that this was an end of a decades-long conservative campaign.
I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg said it was bad law.
Yeah, that's literally what Ruth. But she'd been saying that since the late 90s or something.
This is like an opinion that's not just held by very conservative people.
Like, where were you?
And one of the opinions of Roe versus Wade is the fact that it's not actually a law. It's a precedent that protected certain outcomes that happened from different types of cases.
Yeah, so there's a lot of problems legally with Roe v. Wade. I don't know if we want to get into that because we can definitely have that discussion.
But it's based on the religious beliefs of 6 people, basically.
Okay, but
it's
what's happening. It's based on that.
It is precisely that.
You should read the.
It's based on the conservative belief that it's a states' rights issue.
No, I read the opinion. I'm saying they're lying.
That, they're lying.
I'm saying they're lying. I'm saying they've come up with a reason, an excuse to
You're just mind reading. You're I know.
They've been doing it for decades. They've been trying to do this for decades.
Kavanaugh's been doing this for decades.
Okay. Wait.
It's not that that's what you do.
Wait, I just want to. Okay.
Barrett's been doing this for decades.
No, the people who got them appointed have been doing it for decades.
Kevin,
you'd stop talking.
Well, I stopped.
You weren't talking.
You got to give me a second, Kevin. Jeez.
I want blood sports still.
I want one person talking at a time. We had 4 people yelling over each other there. So this is what I'm going to do because I don't think chat really heard what you guys were trying to say. I want Kevin to say his position, right? And then we're going to have one person respond to what Kevin's position was, okay? And Counter, I saw you. I'm going to write your name down.
Thanks.
Yeah, they've spent decades, and again, not the individual justices, obviously. Many of them weren't even, well, they were children at the time that this sort of thing would have started. The religious right in America, through its legal entities, have been trying to get justices appointed who will eventually take this decision down. They've been trying for 50 years. They finally succeeded, and I suppose in a very Machiavellian sense, congratulations, you evil bastards. But this is what they've been trying to do. This is not based on law. They decided they didn't like it, and they were going to get rid of it by hook or by crook, including stealing Merrick Garland's seat.
So some people may have had that position. I'm not going to argue that there are like no conservatives in the country who were willing to do whatever is necessary to get rid of Roe. The argument that I'm making is that Roe v. Wade was bad law. It's bad constitutional law. It's based on a very tenuous extrapolation from the 14th Amendment, as well as an interpretation of common law and history that is not really rooted in the facts. And so if you look at the way that Roe v. Wade was written, it wasn't just conservatives who said it was bad law. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as we brought up, is one of these people who for decades criticized Roe v. Wade on the basis that it was bad law. So when we see the decision from the court and it's all of this legal arguments, those legal arguments are correct, right? So maybe they have like ulterior motives, right? Unfortunately, I'm not a mind reader, unlike Kevin. So I can't mind read the Supreme Court justices' actual views and like what they're intending.
No semblance of intuition at all, no?
Yeah, no, I'm not. I can take them at their words, right? So their words say the legal argument.
People are incapable
and the
of
legal
lying.
argument is correct. But I can't tell that they're just lying, right? Because frankly, I'm not willing to read in my own political bias into that. I can only take things at face value.
No, you are a completely dispassionate, non-biased individual.
Exactly. Thank you, Kevin. That's so true.
Longer when you do that? I'm curious.
What is that?
I was asking him if he thought it made his point stronger when he cut her off and was snarky and all that.
It's okay. I'm being snarky too. It's fun.
This is the Hippy Dippy.
You could convince somebody so much better if you would just like go with what she's saying and bounce off of it, but you're just unwilling to do that.
And it's okay.
There's three people talking at the same. There's three people that are waiting to talk. I got
Well,
you.
let's, yeah.
So
let's go to
next, I want to
Malcolm.
go to. Well, there was Turk was waiting to talk. Counterpoint was waiting to talk. Then we can
Transphobia.
Exactly.
Counterpoint.
Turk?
Counterpoints first. Counterpoints first.
Okay.
Thanks, buddy.
Then.
Yeah, so I just want, even though it was like 15 minutes ago, I want to address it. So Malcolm doing the life starts at breath thing, you know, basically, I understand what you're doing logically, where it's like a shit post against religious people saying like, oh, you know, you don't even understand your own religious works as a result.
Oh, I'm Catholic,
you know,
just for clarification. I do know.
Well,
it.
interesting.
It, so.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, that's actually super interesting. But life starts at breath. The reason, so I would say from a non-religious perspective, but somebody who's probably more centrist on this, is that's actually like a monstrous position. Like taking a viable fetus that's at like, you know, 22 weeks or 22 weeks after, it's perfectly healthy, mom's perfectly healthy, and then just saying, oh, you can abort just because life begins at the first breath. That, like, I hope it's a shit post, because basically that position to me is monstrous. Okay, well, you can explain it in a second. Then the other point is, from my perspective, after like 18 to 22 weeks, when the central nervous system pops in, that's where I start to view that as, you know, basically no longer a proto-human, but actually like a human with some level of sentience. And so the argument that was made was, well, pro-choice, you know, it's your choice, just choose not to do it. Well, that's not good enough for me, because we don't make that kind of exception for any other form of homicide. We don't say like murder is statistically rare, therefore if you don't want to murder people, just don't murder people. That's obviously not the kind of like moral injunction that we put up against our society. Finally, addressing Mr. Kevin, because I want to give everybody something to deal with. Decades long ambition from conservatives. You're absolutely right. It was a decades long ambition from conservatives, but that's because in the 1970s, there was legislation from the bench, basically, where Roe v. Wade inferred a bunch of rights from privacy and then extrapolated out onto the general population. And conservatives at the time basically took that on the chin. They said, fuck me. This has nothing to do with our Constitution. This has nothing to do with anything that's passed through the legislature. This has nothing to do that's been passed through the House or through the Senate. But basically, we have to deal with the law of the land as it presently exists, and we have to mount a decades-long campaign to reverse this. So they did, and they succeeded. And I appreciate you congratulating the Machiavellian evil motherfuckers who finally repealed this shit. But one of the questions that I got from chat is, does anybody have, like, there's all these moral arguments for why abortion should be legal. Is there any legal arguments for why abortion should be legal in the United States? And following that, do you see a path going forward? And I'll leave it there.
Yeah,
Well,
I would
can I-
suggest that the legal one would be that they're not actually people. So it's not homicide. They're not. They don't have sapiens. They're not. They don't have personhood.
After 22 weeks with a viable fetus,
after
that's
22
a
weeks,
monstrous
okay, that's
fucking position.
Well, regardless of where you want to set the line, we can argue about this many weeks or that many weeks. Until that point is reached, they're not personhood, so it's not. They're not. It can't be homicide because
I mean, in my opinion, even if they are
wait,
persons.
I wanna throw it over to since we're on this line of questioning, I want to make sure Turk eventually gets to talk, but I want to make sure Malcolm seems to want to respond to that, so I'll throw it over to Malcolm.
Well, so as far as like late term abortion goes, I just wish that we could kind of abandon this idea that there's some random woman out there that's getting cream pied like 5 days a week and is like, oh my God, I can't wait to go to the abortion clinic and get another one, like LOL. Like the late term pregnancy or the late term abortions that are done are usually like literally life saving, or the fact that somebody who had like a stillborn or a miscarriage that isn't releasing. Maybe there's like 1 out of like 1 million people that's like, oh my God, I can't wait to go and get my abortion every Friday, girls' night, let's go. I wish that we could dispel that. And the idea that this is like a consequence of like, I think it was Madam that brought it up, and this is just kind of piggybacking off of that this is like some kind of consequence for like having sex. Like you have sex and you get pregnant, and the consequence of that is like in return giving birth to a human being that you have to like fester in your body for 9 months and then emotionally, financially, like whatever, support it for 18 years. This is like a consequence or a punishment that we wouldn't accept for literally anything else. So in response to the question of like, what is the legality metric for this? I would say it's like self-defense. If somebody's like encroaching on like your personhood and your autonomy, even in the case where it's not life-saving, where this is like a commitment that is for life, if you are unable to or unwilling to care for this life, it's better for the life that will potentially happen. And it's also like your right to defend yourself against that kind of stuff as well, especially if we're talking about like a hostile pregnancy or like an ectopic pregnancy or a miscarriage that like won't release. Like all of these things will feed into that idea that this is like a defensive case of action against like this hostile thing that's attacking your body from the inside.
But you just blended like two concepts. Like, so, and how does the Catholic Church? So, for instance, you said like, let's dispel with this myth. Number one, seeing them all on Twitter. So there's at least 3
I know.
of them. Okay,
that's where I get on.
Then, yeah, that's where I do too. Anyways, but the point being that you did just blend in, even if it's voluntary, as if we weren't going to catch that. If we were talking about ectopic, guess what? Well, I'll explain. So in the 13 states, like even the most like strict states or whatever, there's all of them have caveats for health of the mother. Every single one of them. I checked out every single one of them. They all have exceptions for health of the mother. So that doesn't eliminate that, because there's still people figuring out the law. Allegedly, there was a doctor on the phone for 20 hours because he didn't know if he was going to be liable for handling an ectopic pregnancy. We haven't settled this, but allegedly that's on the books. Then when it comes to what I'm talking about is viable fetuses with self-defense. How the fuck does the Catholic Church deal with your self-defense argument against a viable fetus of fucking 20 weeks? Because that doesn't seem very Catholic to me.
Well, because life doesn't begin until first breath. So
look, if we're talking self-defense,
I don't consider it a human life.
That's a very stupid point.
I wouldn't consider it a human life until after birth.
If we're talking
the Catholic Church disagrees with you, but okay.
That's fine. The Catholic Church also thinks that my kind are like unraveling society, like from the hinges. So
So
I don't
me
have to agree with
that's
everything, right?
traumatized for having a miscarriage at 3 months. It's like it wasn't even a baby. I'm just freaking out for nothing, right?
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, most women don't process it
Like
that
I
way.
named it. I wanted to keep it. It was 3 months. It wasn't a baby though, right?
No,
When
I
I
don't
lost
think so.
it, I was fucked up for years. That was just
Yeah, of course.
else, right?
That's definitely traumatic for sure, but that doesn't
Really,
mean that it's
losing
like a viable
cells
life.
is
Yeah,
traumatic. Wow.
it can be. Yeah,
No,
Wait,
they're
okay.
alive.
One second.
it can be. Yeah.
Kevin, you got to talk a little bit. Turk has been waiting very patiently.
Oh, yeah, you're good.
I can cut. I can. You know, I shave like shit off my feet. Like there's tons of clump of cells in my bath, and I wash it off, and I don't cry about it. You know, that's weird how that happens.
And that is really interesting.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So to Kevin, going back into the is Roe good law or whatever, I've posted a video into the group chat. It's a TED Talk based on Catherine Colbert. She was one of the prosecutors or defendants. I don't know. I don't remember off the top. But they were one of the people that were part of the Roe discussion. And she even admits that it was on rocky ground and even came to the conclusion that it was going to get overturned because it was precedent. It wasn't based on any factual thing that was legislated by Congress or by the state legislature. So I hate that your opinion is just wrong. You're just going to have to eat it and take the L, my friend. And then go into Malcolm. I refer you back to your Catholic catechism, dude. Life begins at conception. If you don't agree with that, then you are not really a Catholic. You're just like a named Catholic.
I'm literally transgender, bro. Like the Catholic Church doesn't even accept my kind. Like there's caveats.
Catholic
say
or
you're
not, though?
Catholic.
I'm like so
Yeah,
confused.
I am Catholic. There's
No,
like
you're
caveats.
not.
But do you
within
like
that, right?
believe in Catholic?
Yes. Holy
Okay.
tradition. Yes.
So you agree
not
with the
that one.
catechism's
Words don't have
place.
meaning for certain people. That's
So
it.
you
It's
agree
very
with the
true.
catechism.
It was just
Question.
confusing, I think, because when you said you were a
Whatever
Catholic, I think
welcome.
people thought you had a certain set of
He's not a
beliefs or-
Catholic.
I know
He
it's
doesn't
crazy.
agree
It's like how people
with
think
his
that
own
because I'm
religion.
trans, I'm like a communist. But yeah.
No, you don't agree with your own
Crazy.
points of your own religion that's been agreed upon by your leaders of your religion. I'm
I
sorry.
know it's
friend.
because I have eyes and a brain and I can read the Bible myself and
You're
make my
not
own
a Catholic.
interpretations. You got
I
me.
mean,
That's a
think that
bastard
that's
strike.
a very
What
good
the
thing to
fuck?
say.
My life has been
If I
ruined.
could redirect us off of religion, I just
That's the
am
most
wondering what
Protestant
your
thing I've
thoughts
ever
are here.
heard.
I have a question
Even-
for my. Oh,
Yeah,
I have a non-religion related question and/or comment here. Taking it back to more of a legal topic. What are your thoughts around if it was an overstep of the court, based on the fact that the original Dobbs Mississippi case was more looking to find clarification or ruling on where limits could be enforced and not attempting to overturn the whole thing? Like the more logical conclusion would have been to reevaluate where the limits can be in place instead of just like throwing both of them out completely.
I'd
love to jump off of that really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd love to jump off of that really quick. Thank you so much. And go into a more legal based argument on this. One of the main issues is that, yes, we've been talking for decades about how Roe v. Wade is precedent. It is not legislation that guarantees people's ability to not just abortion, but it's sort of a trickle down effect when you get into the bodily autonomy nature of not just abortion, but also Plan B, also regular contraception. Even the ability to have sex. Now, what I'd like to say on this is that we have a group of people in this country who say, oh, well, that's a slippery slope. It's going to lead to babies getting abortions or whatever. And my answer to that is, frankly, we already have tiered or scaling bodily autonomy based on our ages when it comes to things like the ability to have a medical procedure by ourselves, or even just the ability to do something like smoke or drink. So I think that that would be a good basis for a new type of legislation that allows for bodily autonomy as more of a right and less of a precedent.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to craft legislation, I do think it makes a lot of sense to enable women to have control over their own pregnancy. And it's very obvious, like it's very clear that so many sociological effects are tied in with this. So there's good reason to like allow women to control when they have children, because raising children in dangerous homes or homes where the women can't like totally provide for them or don't have a stable family home life has all of these negative effects growing up. And we really see that borne out in the data, especially with crime. So I think it does make sense for especially liberal states to really consider making sure that whatever right to abortion they have is really codified in law and is strong, so that it's not going to be overturned by the court or by, federal legislation.
Can I just pipe in with a couple of bits? Firstly, as the Turks video, you linked a TED Talk video. Okay, a person thinks a thing. Like lawyers disagree about stuff. I don't know. I'm not sure how that classifies as an L, that you found someone who agrees with you. Well done.
No, it's just a lot of people believe this on all sides of the aisle.
Yeah, exactly.
The person that prosecuted...
Right, and a lot of people...
No.
Well.
You completely didn't hear what I said. The person that presented that TED Talk was one of the people that litigated the Roe versus Wade
Well, there's no way I
arguments.
could have watched it. I'm literally live now with you. I don't know. How can I have watched it?
I know,
Well, he said that earlier.
and you discredited everything I said, saying, "Oh, it doesn't matter. It's just a single person." No, if you actually...
It's a single person, yes.
Okay, never mind.
Well, it was only 6 people
Anyway,
who decided it, so...
Can I... Well, yeah. as to Connor's point about exceptions for the mother's health, I will point out that the law in Ireland, before they're currently changing it because of the repeal of the Ninth Amendment thing, but they had exceptions for that as well, and several women were denied unrightly denied abortions and were essentially allowed to bleed out because of that. If you look at the case of Savita Halapanava, however the fuck you pronounce it, it was a particularly brutal case of that. So even with laws that technically allow for that kind of exception, they're often written in a way that basically doesn't allow for that exception.
And what's the point of
admit
having
people-
any laws?
Wait, quickly, I want to just say, Turk, you sure you don't want to respond to any of that, or?
No, I trust that Kevin will be good faith and actually watch the TED Talk, because it's a person that litigated the Roe versus Wade decision that agrees that the precedent wasn't going to be held fast forever. It was eventually going to fall apart, and it's up to the legislatures to actually go and codify it.
Well, I agree they should have codified it, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone on this panel says that they shouldn't have codified it. The Roe versus Wade thing is just bad legal precedent and law.
Well, surely you don't want them to
you
have
don't want
codified
them
it.
to codify it, right?
If the I morally am against it, but if the group of people I live with in my community wanted to have certain things in place for certain things, and it goes through the legislative process, my voice can be heard. When it's being legislated from the bench, that's not good for the country.
I think that's respectable, because that's pretty much my position as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to shove my religion down people's throats. I know plenty of other conservatives would like to do that, but I am more respectful in that degree. And I like I said in my intro, y'all did hear the intro, yeah. I think there do need to be carve-outs and exemptions for abortion, because there's certain instances where it is probably a good thing. As much as I hate to say it, there are probably instances for that.
And almost everyone agrees on that. When you look at the statistics,
most conservatives believe that abortion should be legal, but there should be restrictions on that.
Legal, safe, and rare, right?
There's a phrase that we've been using on my stream for the past few weeks while we've been talking about it, and it's in response to something like morality is subjective, or the morality on abortion is subjective. And I'd like to say that it is objective. There is a clump of cells, a life, however you would like to label it, that's being snuffed out. However, it's medically individualized objectivity. It is something that needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis with medical information in tow by a professional to make sure that what y'all are talking about, the ability for people to get this when they really need it, not just when they want it, is guaranteed.
And
I want to give a concession to Kevin. So allegedly in Texas within the past week, when the law passed, there was, so like, I'm not saying that this was on Twitter because I get all my news from Twitter, right? But there was a story of a doctor who basically, there was a lady with an ectopic or some kind of rupture, and they were calling the like lawyers allegedly for like half a dozen hours before they put the woman into surgery, because they were so afraid that they were going to like fuck up the liability and then be able to be sued for committing a homicide and maybe go to jail and all that kind of stuff. Exactly, yeah. So there's a woman who's bleeding in the fucking ER room waiting to be seen, who possibly could die from a rupture, and you got the doctor basically figuring out liability on the back end. It's monstrous.
That's what happened in Ireland. They could have saved her, and they just had to let her bleed out.
Well,
die
and there's also
examples of this,
there's also
doctors and nurses are speaking out about.
Well, and there's also conscientious objectors as well, where like Catholic hospitals, for instance, I believe there was like some example in like Maryland or some shit. Literally, they like turned away a patient due to like a religious objection, where they said like, we can't perform it. Like, go to another hospital while the woman's bleeding.
I'm old enough to remember the fucking Republican scare about death panels at the time of the Obamacare thing, and now all of a sudden they're like, actually no, we should have death panels where we decide the fate of a woman who's bleeding to death on a table. Like, it's evil. It's fucking evil. Let the doctors save the person's fucking life.
The doctors wanted to. It's unfortunate the legal system prevented it.
Well, exactly, yeah. The legal system needs to get the fuck out of the way. Like,
well, and I think that's part of the problem too.
Their work.
I think that's part of the problem too, is that everybody agrees that like at the very like bare minimum, like bottom bar, that like rape, incest, like if you're gonna die in those circumstances, like you should just be allowed to do it. But the problem is that a lot of this legislation doesn't make exceptions for these kind of things, or even like we were talking about a little.
There
and
are
then like
some examples
like
where
with
there are not.
like
Only
we
one, as far as I'm
well
aware.
well like we were talking about earlier too, with the idea that like even if that was happening, they can't leave the state either, right? So if you were like on the border of like Texas and I don't know whatever states like liberal right there, if you're gonna
That
fucking
hasn't passed
die
yet.
and skipping across the border or whatever, you can still get in trouble for that kind of shit. So like I think that bare minimum, like we all agree that there should be like these exceptions, like very bottom of the barrel, but the reality is that a lot of these don't have that exception in there where it's just across the board blanket, like we're just not going to do it at all, and that's the problem, right?
I think that's only true for one state that is that strict, and all of the states
Well, as of
have
now, yeah.
exceptions.
Well, Missouri has the same
There
one where
are
if you
like 3 to 5 that are considering it. I'm trying to pull it up right now, but
Well-
there is only a few states that are
well,
looking at
but that's
that.
still like people
Still, yeah,
dying,
it
right?
affects
Yeah.
millions of people, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, again, like everyone on this panel would not like support abortion restrictions that restrict it in the case of rape, incest, or medical necessity. So
Yeah, but the
I
people on
think
this
we could
panel
all
aren't
say that,
creating
like,
laws.
I
I'm
agree.
sorry, what?
Yeah, actually, could I be the centrist or whatever? We're dealing with like the outcome of our worldview, which is basically like they're not as nuanced or centroid as we are, where they're just like, I'm pretty sure out of the 13 states that passed the like no abortion law, only one of them has rape and incest as an exception, and all the other ones are health of the mother. So
and then
that,
Missouri
like, so,
is doing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Connor.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I don't think I mean, I want to hear what you're going to say, but I don't think anybody's passed the cross-border laws yet.
I think
I don't
Texas
think they passed
has.
it
I'm
yet.
not 100% confident, but I know that Missouri has a bill up that's like more than likely going to pass. That like if the baby was like conceived in Missouri, that you still can't get an out-of-state abortion because it was conceived in Missouri. That was one that was just proposed, and it's looking like it's pretty spicy, and it looks like it's probably going to pass.
That's
The federal
incredible. So
government
then
just
you've then got it depends where
Should.
you spunk as to what the legality of the situation is. That's fucking embarrassing.
Well,
That's
spunk in California.
Well, exactly.
Louisiana is currently dealing with the fact that a judge has blocked. So Louisiana is one of the states that had laws that automatically, as soon as Roe v. Wade was overturned, they went into effect. I think it's both of the abortion clinics in Louisiana have been closed as of right now. And there is one judge who has held out and said that we cannot stop selling Plan B yet. However, that is also expected to be overturned. So Plan B may actually be off the shelves in Louisiana very soon. So I think that there's probably a lot in a lot of different states that's sort of in the ticks of the legal system, and it's not quite sure if they're going to actually go through yet.
Yeah.
Well, but then
about like
sorry, go ahead.
contraception. So sorry, types of contraceptive like Plan B, or even like an IUD, which is going to prevent implantation but still allow for fertilization. And by these definitions, those types of birth control or emergency contraceptive would not be allowable, which is really just making the need for abortion even greater because we're not able to work to prevent us from getting to that point.
And this is actually the point of it being, I think we're going to see with the challenges to other court cases with the rights to single people being able to get contraception, for instance, which is one of the cases that Thomas mentioned. This is why I think the pro-life people, the hardcore pro-life people, we need to start calling them forced birth people, because that's what they are. That's their actual fucking position.
Oh.
If you can't get contraception, which is the thing they're pushing for, and you can't get an abortion, then you're basically, if you ever have sex, you're going to have a kid.
Well,
That's
the-
their
It's
position, it
by
seems.
choice because
So
they
the-
don't like the choice of having contraceptive actions. They don't like the choice of sex ed being taught in schools for people to understand the way that their bodies work, and then they don't like choices being available after a pregnancy has occurred.
And this is
Well,
from
okay.
the small government people as well. Small
Well,
government,
y-
yeah.
Yeah, so the way that you guys are kind of rolling a grenade into the rightoid camp, and we're going to have to reconcile with these people, I want to throw a grenade into the leftoid camp and just say, at some point, is this not like the shittiness of democracy? So what I mean by that is like I'm a Republican, meaning that I think that you should basically enshrine your fundamental rights into law, and then maybe we should touch up on things every now and then. But this is like, unfortunately, the popularity contest has not gone your way in 13 fucking states, and now there are like horrific consequences. But this is the rule of the
can I just-
majority within these localities.
It
I
is
just
the
point out that- can I
democratic
just point out
position
that
of these people, yeah.
The Democratic candidate has won in, was it 13 of the last 15 presidential elections, has won the majority.
Okay, but
of
we're looking
votes.
at individual
So you're talking about the
states.
popularity
Looking at
contest.
states.
It's the fact that
I don't
in
know
North Dakota
what
gets
this
2
point
senators,
is.
even though it's like 12 people there.
If
It's
you
ridiculous.
go to Missouri, people are conservative. I don't know if you've heard about this, but like these states in America are full of very conservative people and very conservative women.
Yeah, not many
who
of
are
them.
pro-
Not many people, though.
Yes.
So why they get 2 senators is ridiculous. Yeah.
So
with
we
different
have a right to
jurisdictions,
writing
privacy,
federal
right?
legislation. They're not legislating for the entire country. They're legislating for their own states, which is why we say the majority in these states is pro-life. That's why
Okay.
it's relevant, because they're not writing.
No,
federal
I'm
legislation.
making
Really
the
quick,
argument.
really quick. I want to touch on this because what we are looking at when we have federal versus state by state legislation on this is whether or not something is a human right, or whether or not it is a civil right, or whether or not something should be more regional and is not considered as core to human safety or our ability to succeed as a country. Okay, so is there anyone on the panel who has a problem with the original Roe v. Wade setting of this being a right to privacy?
Yeah, I don't think
Do we
it
object to
stems from
that?
right to
Yeah.
privacy.
Yeah, is there anybody who says on this panel that this is not something that is a right to privacy, that having an abortion or being able to choose to have an abortion, etc.?
Yeah, I think there's a limit here, and the limit kind of boils down to the bodily autonomy argument. So, for instance, if you were going to say, like, I'm making a medical decision as an autonomous person about my health, and under these certain provisions, these gestational periods, I am a person who's making a decision about my own health. I think that's an argument that you can make that falls under the umbrella of privacy, probably 20 weeks and under. But after 20 weeks, with viability, there's a second, from my perspective, there's a second person there. So the self-defense argument no longer applies. The non-aggression principle does apply, and the state intervention does apply in order to intervene. And Kevin, I'm not a libertarian. I just know we have libertarians here. Okay, just
I know, but anytime I hear non-aggression principle, I just hear about.
Oh, does it hurt you physically? Because it hurts me physically.
It does, yeah. It's awful.
And I think the other part of the argument there too is also that the not the legislature setting those time limits, viability, feasibility, all that stuff. It was the Supreme Court setting those standards, and that's something that many conservatives don't like. Legislation from the bench.
It
should be
looks like a law, like how it's written.
Yeah, so that's one of the major issues with it, and that's why a majority of people still support abortion, but there should be restrictions on it.
I'll just echo what Connor is saying, or what Counterpoints is saying as well, with the regards to it stemming from privacy. I am pretty concurrent with what Alito said, in that abortion is a special circumstance because it concerns something that is not present in other cases, other rulings that dealt with right to privacy, which is the presence of a potential person. And so the 14th Amendment, it does not mention the word privacy. That's not within the text. So you extrapolate that out from liberty. And I think that's probably a reasonable extrapolation. It also doesn't mention abortion, or that abortion is necessarily something that stems from right to privacy. So we're getting 2 layers of abstraction out from the actual text of the 14th Amendment. And that abstraction is problematic because it also concerns the morality of other people, of potential life. And so only Clarence Thomas, which is the most conservative justice, believes that we should reevaluate other Supreme Court rulings that stemmed from the right to privacy. And everyone else, including, Alito, disagrees presumably with that. So I think that that's probably legitimate, that greater position that these other cases are fundamentally different in that they don't concern potential life.
I'm gonna hold you to that then. When
Yeah.
they do start stripping those rights away, I will have to dunk on you and say I told you so.
I mean,
Told me what? That it's. I don't think it. I don't think it legally makes sense. So, like, if they do strip away further rights, I don't think there's a good legal argument for that. But I think there's.
I don't think they particularly care about good legal arguments. They've got their.
Well,
Yeah, we understand that.
I'd be interested to hear an argument against the potential, because I realize, in my brain, it's kind of squishy. It's like, I know that potential life to me is not as important as the health or the life of whoever the fully formed mother is as a person.
Yeah.
But
neither
I
to
don't
me.
necessarily have like a logical thing ready
Can
for
I?
that. Does anybody have that?
Well, for me, it's sentience as well
Most
as like
abortions have nothing to
dependency.
do with that.
Wait,
By the way.
hold on.
Most
Counter?
abortions have nothing to do with protecting the life of the mother. I just love that we don't mention that at all throughout the whole thing. Like most abortions are not to protect health. Like it's a choice.
A lot of those choices
Like
are
the
made
stats, where's
because
the stats?
somebody
Like
might already have conditions where it's going to be very dangerous for them. I think health is certainly a factor in a lot of them. I know there's a statistic that flies around from the 90s that says 99% of abortions are convenience based, but that statistic is looking at only women who were in an emergency situation and had to have an abortion to literally save their life right then. It's
I
not
think
really
in Canada we have better
representative.
stats than that, and we have way more precise stats than that. And I still think it's like
Health.
it's like it's pretty low. And what I'm saying is like we should change the conversations from all these things, which seem kind of disingenuous, and maybe go towards like how Johnny Scarlett says, kind of a tiered system of morality. So like if you're stop taking it to the government and we should do it between us and really do care about the life and say it is a life, but your life is more important, and put it in a tier system. If you're a 16-year-old being pregnant, you're not going to be treated the same. You're going to be helped and all of that. But I think we should bring in more to that so we can actually give the care we need to people. Because people, even if you make it illegal, people are going to have these abortions in garages, like my mom in communist Romania when she was 16. Okay, and I don't think we want to be like the communists over here.
Think about what you just said, and then think about what you said before about health, how supposedly abortions a lot of the times aren't for health, but define health, babe. Your mother's future and her mental health as a 16-year-old is part of her health.
Well, and the health of the fetus after. The health of the fetus after, like if you live in like a
baby
shack
would
or
have been
whatever.
great. That baby would have been fine. She would have done fine, okay? What I'm saying here, the commies took care of the babies in the farms if they had farms and moms, and that wasn't the problem. It's the orphan babies that suffered. Anyways, my point is like, if we want to have these conversations, we got to be honest about what's going on. The girl, she's going to suffer after the abortion. It's not like, haha, I shouldn't take this seriously and then have an abortion and there's no problem there. Like, we need to, like, words matter. We need to be honest with what's happening and what we're doing. And that way, people are going to be more careful and we are going to help the ones to which it happens. It's not going to be like, people aren't going to see it as like a candy you take. Like, sorry to tell you, but like an abortion pill is traumatizing to take. It's traumatizing.
Okay, Turk and counter.
Yeah, just a quick point to Kevin. So I know you're worried about the erosion of all of our, constitutional rights and stuff, but we've already heard from the President Biden himself that no constitutional right is absolute. So they've already told us what the game plan is, and that's from the Democrats themselves. So you just need to be aware that you're going to
Joe Biden.
You're going to lose your rights regardless. The Second Amendment is constantly under attack. I'm really, well, yeah, of course, because you're in a bad place, man. But like the First Amendment is being eroded in certain instances, and others are as well. So it's like that's why conservatives are here, in order to prevent those erosions and in order to get back to
different erosions instead.
Well, abortion's not a constitutional right. Sorry.
Well, it was up until last week.
No, it was protected by a court precedent. It's not a constitutional
but they're the final
right.
arbiter. It's not in the Constitution.
It was
an allowable
right
thing in this country. Yeah. It was an allowable thing in this country based on the decision that it was that it fell under.
There was a constitutional
and
right.
since it wasn't actually legal or a constitutional right, it could be just swept away due to interpretations of a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, but that's what the Supreme Court does.
I don't want to be like too pedantic on this, but it was a right.
I do want to be pedantic. So no, this is the same thing with like the executive actions under Obama, that all the conservatives were like, hey, you're doing executive actions, like next Republican, he's gonna be able to fuck all this shit up, and they were like, nope. So they just passed that shit. What happened as soon as fucking Trump came into office? He fucked it all up. So no, you can build fucking shaky ground if you want, but when the next fucking kid walks over and kicks your sandcastle in, like, no, you didn't build the shit correctly. And then I wanted to address Johnny Scarlett. Johnny Scarlett was asking whether or not there's any like objective or non-emotional argument for the protection of proto-life, like basically life before 18 weeks or 20 weeks. I don't have an argument. It's raw instinct. It's emotion. It has not like I don't have an objective measure for you. All I can tell you is that when I was having my son, we were in like a high risk environment or whatever. So we went to go see the OB early. We see, strong ass heartbeat on the cardiogram. At that point, he's basically just a heart and a clump of cells around him. But I didn't see a heartbeat. I saw my son. And I saw the potentiality of what he would become and who he is, and he's going to be a reflection of his mother, and he's going to be a reflection of me. And that instinct and that attraction has nothing to do with like statistics or objectivity or anything like that. But I do think it taps into that caveman brain of protecting like an infant. So I'm not saying it's an infant. I'm just saying that I don't think you're going to find an objective, rational justification here. It's all going to be emotional and subjective.
Too, and to be honest, I think that that's more of an argument for us to really observe this on a level of legally allowing people to do or not do an activity that could save their lives. And for me, evolution is the ability to look, to observe your most base instincts and say, I'm going to use that, or I'm not going to use that, or I'm going to change it. It's why humans and dolphins evolved to have sex for pleasure instead of procreation, Like,
hang on, humans and
we're
dolphins
allowed,
don't have sex.
we're allowed,
Well, not with each
we're
other.
allowed to like look
Generally.
at the fact that maybe some of us are having this really emotional reaction to the ability of other people to choose to have an abortion. And these people on this side are saying, I am so emotionally torn and not okay with you doing this. And so me, again, like having a society, we have to look at that and we have to say, okay, maybe that's not necessary for how we should let other people do things.
I think a lot of conservatives like flossing on the grave of like Roe versus Wade is that emotional instinctive objection where like a lot of people were super casual about sex, super casual about abortion, super casual about basically Plan B, super casual about all this kind of shit. And the conservatives are like screaming from the hills, no, you're dealing with like proto-life. We have this like instinctive, subjective feeling that this is something that's very important and sacred to us. And you're basically stomping all over it. So then now that they were able to overturn Roe versus Wade, they're celebrating. And so I think that's like...
It's not just that. I think certainly since the age of Trump, literally owning the libs, it doesn't matter. They would destroy the world to own the libs. So the fact that they've got a W they can dunk on people with, that's it. The point is, if liberals are angry, upset, and hurt, they will celebrate, and they don't care what the reason is for it.
I wish I could disagree with you, but I can't.
They're not mustache twirling villains. They genuinely believe that they're sticking up for the rights of the unborn. Like, if you talk to these people, they'll say things that this decision and this fight is purely altruistic, and they're fighting for the rights of people who can't speak up for themselves. So like they believe these things like very deeply and genuinely. It's not just
both
to
things
own
can
the
be
lib.
true.
I was about to say, can we get a
mustache twirling
hashtag
villains
not
for
all?
sure.
Can we get a hashtag not all? Because like
I think the majority
some of them are fucking
conservatives
assholes.
genuinely believe it. Like they take pleasure. I'm sure a lot of them take pleasure.
Of them.
But like the fundamental reasoning is not just to own the libs. Like that's not why they're doing it at core. Because there's lots of ways. Okay, as long as we acknowledge that like.
Also, they'd be more interesting if they were mustache twirling villains.
Well, and you can have good intentions, but still have like negative consequences. Like if they really cared about like the outcomes of these kind of things, why don't they support like social programs for like early parents, right? Like you have a kid, like you get X amount of time off of work or whatever. It's paid. Like childcare is more accessible, like easier to afford. Like having a kid's fucking expensive, and it like slams your entire life to a screeching halt. Like instead of trying to like ban abortion, why don't they like spend all their time trying to like facilitate better lives for like kids who are born and are wanted?
Because Reaganism and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race.
But they do it more on a community basis, like small community instead of wide. At least
It's been brought up. True Mama brought this up, and maybe someone else. I'm not 100% sure about the idea that people are using abortions casually, right? Like it's just like I'm gonna pop in and get an abortion type thing, because I just do that, bi-monthly or whatever, and that's just fundamentally wrong. Like that's
I've never seen it happen.
true.
I'm
Like,
not a
there's
woman.
this-
I don't have women
yeah,
friends. You're right.
Like that's this myth that is just
Wait,
perpetuated.
you just ignore my existence. You just brushed off my whole existence with your hand waved it.
Most
You
women,
know, my
who
first fucking
6 out of
friend was a
10
teenager that had an abortion. I held her hand while she got the fetus stuck out, and then she wanted to have a baby, but just with another guy. So she went and had sex the same week as she had the fucking abortion. My
There's
fucking friend,
obviously like
she was my
exceptions
best
and
friend.
outliers. There's
No, but
obviously
because you're
exceptions and
acting like
outliers.
these don't exist. But this is a
I'm
formative
telling you, those are
experience
the
that I went through
exceptions
that
and
you just
outliers,
brushed off.
and
Like,
more than half,
I'm so
greater
tired
than
of people pretending like
50%,
these things aren't happening.
Greater than 50% of abortion.
Give me a second. I can't hear either of what you guys are saying because you're talking over each other. So I'm gonna have Madam go, and then I'll bring it back to Tro. Okay? Because just
Can I just say, True had a go at me for interrupting earlier. I just want to point that out. Just
So again,
maybe
I
I'm a bit
acknowledge.
triggered by what she devalued my existence. I'm triggered.
you'll
Not
just let her
because of
finish.
Kevin.
You want to wait your turn because it's my turn right now.
No, I was just saying that to Kevin before you started
okay,
again.
please.
Sorry.
Okay, nobody else talks. Madam.
It's a misconception that these exceptions, these rare examples that you're looking at, are the majority. 6 out of 10 people who get abortions already have children. So it's something that they're looking at not only as a decision that's going to impact their own life, but their existing family already. And greater than 50% of people who seek out an abortion have not had one previously. So while I'm not denying that those situations do occur and that they happen, they're not what's happening most of the time. They're exceptions.
Thanks for correcting what you're
Exception.
saying.
Which situation is the exception? I'm sorry, I was unclear.
Like the
People
girl that
who are
likes to
getting
get cream
abortions
pied
such
like
as
every day.
Christian. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, like I got pregnant twice and I
Right.
had 2 miscarriages, and that's why I didn't have to have an abortion.
Mhm.
So maybe I was being careless and no one else that I know was being careless. Oh wait, never mind. The people around me were careless and they had to have an abortion. I had to hold their hands and then they went to do it again the same week. When we had like free birth control available to us.
Genevieve, I'm really glad.
But you're right, this doesn't happen.
Yeah, Genevieve.
Maybe you're
She said
more
that it does
Okay,
happen.
okay,
Everybody said
okay.
that it does.
She's saying
I feel like
Okay.
I'm not going to
stop,
repeat myself
please.
over and over again if
We're-
you're not going to listen to the point
No,
that I'm
I
actually
agree.
making.
Please
I've already said it
stop.
multiple
Please
times.
stop. Okay.
you corrected what you're saying. Well,
Okay.
Can you stop interrupting
gonna go-
Dylan, please?
We're gonna go now over to Turk. I'm gonna have Turk speak. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Genevieve, I'm glad you actually brought up the statistics because I've been doing a lot of the statistics looking at, and you are correct that, you know, most of these abortions happen for people that have only done it 0 times and the rest are more than 1. But if you look at it from the other perspective as well, other than the instances of incest and rape, which are like 1 to maybe 5% of cases, most, or health of the mother, most abortions are elective. And it's like people keep celebrating both ends of the spectrum. I really wish we would all be consistent in our takes and not trying to emotionalize, the far left or the far side of a topic in order to justify something that's not bound by data.
No, what I would like to ask you the same question that I asked True earlier. You're saying elective, and I think the phrasing that was brought up earlier was most abortions are not for health, not for the health of the mother. Now, I think we're using health in this really either specific or vague way, and nobody's really talking about the emotional health of someone who's forced to have a child they don't want, the emotional health of a person who has to go through an adoption process for a child that they may have wanted if they were older or if they had better financial support. Are you disincluding, when you say that elective abortions are being emotionalized, are you denying that emotional health and financial health are very important to
They're
families?
talking about physical health.
You know, so
financial health is directly correlated to physical health.
Yeah, I know, but like when the laws are written, they're talking about like life of the mother being threatened by some factor in the pregnancy where having the child or carrying the child to term is a direct threat to her life. So like,
okay, yeah,
that's what they're talking about.
I can answer
that
this
I
directly.
know legally, yes. I'm more so talking about him. Yes, your opinion.
No, my opinion's not an opinion here. So the sensationalization of these atopic pregnancies, sorry if I'm saying the wrong term, or rape and incest are a statistically small amount of abortion cases.
Ectopic.
Thank you. And in the other end, go into true mama, people that get multiple abortions because it's fun and they pop the pills like candy. That's the other end of the spectrum. That's also a very rare occurrence. I wish that both sides would stop being sensationalized in order to push an agenda. To answer your question directly, sorry, Connor, Florida sucks. But the only data I've looked at is from a Florida 2020 I don't know if it was a poll or if it was just, polling people as they walked out of the clinic, but 75% of the people that went into the abortion or came out went in for no reason. 20% came for social or economic reasons. And then the rest of that was for some sort of physical or mental health thing.
Why do they need a reason?
Said they don't have a reason because, I
think that
and that's
can
entirely
be a really unreliable way to draw conclusions.
Another thing that's really important with the idea of elective procedures too is that like it can be elective, but we can say that like cancer treatment is elective, right? Like you're electing to get the procedure done. So if you're just saying like it's elective, that doesn't really mean much of anything. If they're like, I just got like cream pied and I'm ready to get my third abortion this week, like obviously that's going to be recorded a little bit differently than just saying it's elective.
So medically,
you go on. Sorry, Johnny, go on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Real quick, medically, it's also classified as elective to do something like I'm at really high risk for melanoma, so I occasionally electively get small spots on my skin removed. Now, it's not necessarily because they are causing me any harm other than they're annoying and I occasionally scrape them on things, but it's medically classified as elective. I don't want to scrape my arm constantly on something that's unnecessary. I don't want to, on a more serious tier of this, I don't want to, as a young person, have a child that I can't properly take care of. However, it's also culturally acceptable to have elective sex. Elective is probably not the word I should use. To have casual sex or to have sex with people that you love that you're not married to. So at some point, I think there's this idea that we should just have abortions be something that are separate from these other ideas like casual sex, and they're not. If we're going to societally allow this, we have to also have protections in place so that people can electively get medical procedures done that save their lives eventually.
Well, ideally all sex should be elective, really, when you think about it.
Scheduled in advance.
Right,
Amen.
You're right.
Scheduled in advance. Let's go.
Yeah. As to a point Turk was making there, I don't know about the reliability of the numbers he cites, but I also sort of don't care. Why does someone have to have a specific reason? It's their choice. It's their body. It's their medical care. Why the fuck should you have any insight into that?
And frequently you might have like multiple reasons that are factoring in, and it's not really something that you can just tell somebody who's taking a survey. I mean, maybe you figured your own health and the effects on that. Maybe you've considered the fact that giving birth causes great bodily harm and that the maternal mortality rates in our country are absolutely horrendous compared to every other developed nation. Maybe you've got all of these different reasons in your mind, but then somebody just asks you and you're like, I don't know. Like,
so I appreciate all that feedback. At the beginning of saying that data source, I even took a stab at Connor because he lives in Florida, and we all know Florida is, not a great state. There's better conservative states, and I completely agree that I don't know what type. This was a survey or an elective poll. It's entirely possible that this data is skewed or they're missing data. Going to what Scarlett said. So, but my point is that both sides of the argument are trying to polarize statistically small things in order to get a rise and to polarize their particular types. Whereas there's other statistics that I can show and represent that would actually help guide a more centrist approach and something that would probably be considered a compromise amongst both crowds.
You have your hand up. Do you want to go?
Yeah, True Mama, if you want to go, but I want to go too.
I'll go quick. I just don't want to be mischaracterized as saying that I'm saying people pop them like pills. I just want to change the language so we put some kind of weight to having the procedure, but keeping it legal as like I was saying, kind of like Johnny was talking about. so we can move this energy that we're all having butting heads into helping women and families in general having healthy pregnancies that go to term and they have happy, healthy outcomes afterwards. Like if we would just take all this energy and like agree to like some kind of like, yeah, morally it's actually bad, but like let's allow it for this and that, so we can take this energy and make people's lives better is kind of what I'm going for. But I'm sorry if that makes people angry to the point of mischaracterizing my points to make me look like a twirling mustache villain or something. Like I'm
Well,
just a really big pragmatic
Mhm.
centrist. I'm in Canada. No party that I ever voted for was against fucking abortion. Like it's not a thing for me. I don't know why I'm treated like I'm pro abortion bans and stuff like that. I'm probably better at convincing right wingers by talking about the communists doing that, like to not be like the same way as them. So I don't know why you're attacking me, but if you can't convince me to be on your side, I don't know how you're gonna convince people who are actually like anti-abortion. Like, damn, you sound like really fucking rough when you're like accusing people like me of doing these things. Is all I'm gonna say.
Well, okay, and then I wanted to piggyback on the conservative appeal to hypocrisy that what happened earlier, which I'm actually perfectly okay with. Redistributive economics is poisonous with boomer conservatives because of Reaganism. They basically said that any kind of economic intervention and redistributive economics is evil. I think that's evil. So basically, if you want to help me hold right wingers to account, that if you want children to grow up in your society, you have to make sure that they're happy and healthy, then yeah, let's fucking do it.
Based. Fucking based.
Based
Love
and
it.
true. We solved abortion. We did it, you
Taff?
guys.
We kind of did.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of something that Johnny Scarlett was talking about, because you're bringing up like the mental health and the financial health and all of these like other values that I think we all consider to be meaningful. And I don't know if I necessarily consider them like part of the health necessarily of the mother, but I do think they're important. And like that's the reason why at the very start of this discussion, I said that if I was like king of a state and I were writing the laws, I would allow access to abortion, and I would allow access to contraception and all of these other ways to control when you have a baby. And it's because I'm like very aware of those other effects financially and socially and mental health wise and so on. And I think those are important. And so I just want to like acknowledge that and say that I think that is something that like we often leave out of the conversation is the general effect on society of having access to abortion and contraception, which we definitely know in the literature is something that's positive.
Sure, yeah, and I love that idea. Like, if I was king of a state, and to put it more into if I was king of America or whatever, if we had to go by American rules, there would be, I think, a baseline of bodily autonomy and respect for the body as a temple in my ideal society. There's an idea that children don't have bodily autonomy, and I don't necessarily think that's true, or shouldn't be true. And so, yeah, my ideal society would have bodily autonomy and the right to safety, perhaps, or the right to reduce harm to oneself. I think that's probably how I would put it, as just something that is universally accepted.
Yeah,
Hey,
like speaking morally, and I'll just finish this very quickly. Like, I'm probably one of these rare people that's willing to just like bite the bullet on the moral question and say, even if it is potential personhood or even is personhood, I think that killing is sometimes justifiable, morally speaking. And I think that abortion is one of these cases where killing is justified because of the sociological effects. And, frankly, you can also make these like these rights to self-defense arguments as well. But in general, I think that like we do consider killing to be morally justified sometimes, and
Look
we
at
just got to look at those
euthanasia.
circumstances. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
And so I
Harm
think
reduction.
this is one of those cases where it's like it's a non-sentient being, and if it's being aborted, we know that like the only people who are probably aware of it are not like depending on it. They're not emotionally like tied into it, and it doesn't have dependence. So like all of the sort of moral downstream effects of killing this maybe person, I think are probably justifiable in this circumstance.
Just on top of like what Taft was saying a second ago, I think something that's important as well is like the outcome of the child. Like a lot of the conversation is centered around like the health of the mother and like what are the outcomes of having pregnancy, like carrying a pregnancy to term, like with high rates of mortality, like giving pregnancy and giving birth and stuff like that. But when we're looking at like the outcome of kids, I personally have known a lot of people like this, and I know in general, if you are unable to like care for like a child versus putting them in like the foster care system, which has its own plethora of issues, I think it's important to consider that as well when we're weighing these kind of options. Like if you are a single mom, you work like 3 jobs, and you fucked up your birth control like one time and you got knocked up, and it's like, damn, like, am I going to be able to give this kid the life that it deserves? I think that that's something that is important to factor in as well when we're talking about like the viability options, as far as like the health of the mother, but also like the health of like the future child. Like if that makes sense. I just kind of wanted to tie onto that as well.
Okay, fuck no. Stop. Sorry. Yeah. I wanted to yell at you, but now I want to.
Okay.
I want to yell at Malcolm, but now I'm going to yell at you both.
Everybody yell.
Fucking Christ. No, the fucking, oh my God, like only in leftoid and hyper utilitarian circles are you going to bump into that a painful non-existence is preferable to a painful existence.
Have you ever fucking been around kids that are in foster care? Have you ever been around kids that are in foster care that grew up in foster care?
Yeah, I've been around plenty of fucking kids.
They don't want to live like
lives.
They don't want to.
They'd rather be dead.
If I had
Rubble. You're getting a little off the rails. Okay. Raise your hand if you want to speak. I'll choose an order. Okay. I'm going to first go with Taft then.
We have sociological literature like the Donahue and Levitt study, as well as other ones that attribute up to 45% of the 55% reduction in crime since, I believe, the 90s to access to safe and legal abortion. Right. So it's not just.
And if I went by demography, could I be a real fucking asshole right now?
Let's not go there. There's also this. It's just the effect on society in general, right? So it's not just like the individual baby who, like, maybe if you were to pull them 20 years later and ask them, like, would you prefer to be like aborted or to have lived? They'll probably say to have lived. But like at the time that they were aborted, they were like a non-sentient clump of cells. And
you're assuming, but yeah.
Probably. And so they were probably a non-sentient clump of cells. And so yeah. And so if we're weighing the moral value of like eliminating this non-sentient potential person versus the massive social benefit of improving people's ability to control their financial destiny and their social and family destiny, that ability to control those things is really beneficial for society, for everyone. And I don't want to live in a society where crime rate like spikes up, 45% because we've decided that it's wrong to eliminate these, clumps of cells.
Okay, can somebody rephrase that as uncharitably as I can? Because basically so I'll rephrase it as uncharitably as possible.
Please.
Aborting poor whites and disproportionately black people has a positive effect on crime 30 years later.
Yeah, you're doing like literal eugenics shit. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's really fucked up. Actually,
that's the that's the pro-choice argument. The pro-choice argument is literally like criminal populations are going to do more abortion.
And if these didn't make the left should go kill the poor.
Also, can I just say,
You're giving black and poor people the ability to control their destinies.
Totally.
You gotta let Taft respond. There was 4.
Yeah, let me respond.
Yeah, let Taft explain why she wants to kill
what the
poor
fuck
whites.
is wrong with you, Connor?
Because it is like the most like absurdly sort of uncharitable interpretation. What you're doing is you're giving poor people the ability to choose when to have children. And when you give them the ability to choose when to have children, they have children in circumstances where they can provide for those children. So it's not that like they're going to have less children overall necessarily.
Are you from the 1850s?
But they are.
What the fuck?
It's that, like,
you sound like a Victorian villain. That we can't allow the poor to breed.
No, I'm saying that they will have children. I'm saying that they should be able to choose.
They'll breed like rabbits. Yeah, we need to sterilize them all.
God. I'm saying that they should be able to choose when they have children, because when you allow people to choose when they have children, they choose to have children when they have the ability to provide for those children, which
That's
is
actually
good
not remotely true. Poorer families tend to have more children.
No, but they will prefer to have children when they can provide for those children.
But
If
again,
you
that's not-
ask
that's-
poor people, they will say, I would prefer to have a child when I have more ability to provide
They might
for the
prefer
child.
to, but that's not the reality that actually comes out of this.
Okay, but when you have access to safe abortion, they are able to pursue
Well, no,
that reality.
I'm pro-abortion. I'm not
Right.
arguing that point. I'm just saying
Yeah,
your weird
you
eugenics
agree with
is
her,
fucked
Kevin.
up. Your
Yeah,
weird eugenics here, where like
individual
poor
choice
people
is
need
not
to be stopped
eugenics.
from breeding. Like,
Individual choice is not eugenics. If you get knocked up and you're like, holy shit, like this kid is gonna like sleep on a mattress in the backseat of my fucking car while I work my 3 jobs, and my 62 like odd boyfriends are gonna be in and out of the
That's a
house. They're probably gonna have a
I don't
horrible
know.
fucking
No,
life.
you're-
Like just
Malcolm,
that is not
Malcolm.
eugenics.
Okay,
That is
Bill,
that is
Bill,
not
I'm not
fucking
saying you
eugenics.
should like sterilize them.
Wait,
I'm saying
please.
that you should allow them to choose when they have children.
Yeah.
So it's a choice about time, not
Yeah,
like
Malcolm-
whether or not they have children.
Malcolm,
The
I'm not-
eugenics argument would be like they're not allowed to have children. That's the eugenics
Yeah,
argument.
Malcolm, I'm not saying that the point you make there is eugenics or that the pro-abortion argument is
That's
eugenics.
what you're
I'm
saying, though.
the way that Taftage put that was eugenics.
No,
Like, that
No,
was
if people
really
are
fucked
free
up.
to make the
Moment.
choice of when they can get an abortion, that's not eugenics. If it's like,
Yeah,
hey,
and
at
it
this point in time in my
disproportionately
life,
affects, black and brown people and poor white people.
that
No,
doesn't
just
mean
go
that it's
to the
eugenics.
birds, one stone.
Individual
And
choice is
just
not
do that.
eugenics.
Let's just
Okay.
cleanse the
Okay.
pool of these criminals.
said-
Bunch of individual
Okay.
One
choices.
second. Okay. True has been waiting for
Condoms are
Stop.
eugenics, by the way.
True has
You
been
said,
waiting
you said, do you know people who were in foster care? Like they would rather not be born. Like some of the best people I know come from.
I
the
don't care
foster
about your
care.
anecdotes. I know 10 people for every
Not
one person that you
anecdotes.
know that wish that they weren't alive because
This
their
is
life
what
was
you're
so
talking about.
traumatic
It's
because they were in
eugenics.
foster care. Like,
It's
I don't care.
eugenics.
I don't care.
Eugenics.
Individual
You just
choice
wanna
is not
make the
eugenics.
foster- You're cutting
Individual
me off,
choice
by
is
the
not
way. You're
eugenics.
not letting me speak. You're afraid of what I'm saying.
I'm not
You
afraid
should
of what
make
you're
the
saying. I don't
foster
care about
care
your friend of
better
your friend of your
instead of saying
cousin.
You should want them to fucking
don't care.
die.
Okay,
I
you
don't
wanna
care about
respond?
your friend of a friend of a friend. I don't care about your friend of a
I'm
friend
not
of a
talking
friend.
about
That
the
was fun.
friend.
Oh, you're not letting me finish.
You're a
You're not
bougie
letting me finish.
motherfucker. You-
Why are you scared? Why are you scared of my
Nobody
answer?
I
Why
know
won't you let me
even have the
finish?
money to
Okay,
say
Why won't you let me
anything.
finish?
Okay.
Why won't you let me
bougie
finish?
fuck.
Stop, please.
Why won't you
both
let
of
me finish?
Please
You're a
stop.
bougie.
True Malma.
Why
Okay.
can't I finish?
Okay, so
True Malma, can you stop
Wait,
interrupting,
Kevin.
please?
Yeah.
This is an outrage.
stop.
Can I finish, please?
Stop. Okay, so
Just
let's
said.
be clear. Wait, stop. She's still going. Okay, give me a second.
Can I finish?
Yes, you gotta let him finish. Then you will speak, and then you'll be allowed to finish. Don't interrupt each other. We can't hear what you're saying. Continue.
Thank you so much. What I was saying is I don't care about your friend of a friend that grew up in foster care that is grateful that they're alive. I know people in my own personal life that grew up in foster care and have been like, if my mom would have gotten an abortion, I would have been like abused, raped, like passed around like 37 different fucking foster homes or whatever. Like, I don't care about your individual experience. I care about the people in foster care that are like horrifically abused because the people were forced to give birth to them when you could just prevent all of these atrocities from happening in the first place. But please tell me about your friend of a friend. I'm really
A lot
interested.
of people in foster care, their parents didn't want to abort them, by the way. So first of all, and second of all, you really like to dismiss everything and hand wave. You all do that. And by the way, you guys seem to think I'm like a rich person. To me, you all are bougie motherfuckers. So like, I don't know why you talk to me like this is not like I don't come from some extremely fucked up place in life. And the fact that I'm 33 and I'm still living this life isn't telling enough. Like, I guess for you, you got to spell it out. Like, I don't know. To me, like the fact that you devalue everything I say without actually hearing what I'm saying makes me disrespect you and what you're saying a lot. I came in listening to what you're saying, trying to bounce off of it, and you've been doing this disrespectful ass shit since the start. So I'm
Hey,
sorry, I'm
friend.
not gonna take it too hard when you're being rude as fuck.
I
And
don't
just-
think that anybody assumes that you came from a place of a special privilege. I
Just
really
talking about
don't.
A friend of a friend and blah blah blah. Like fuck you, dumbass.
That's
Nobody-
all you're doing.
Yeah.
That's all you're doing is talking
I
about
don't-
your
I
friend of
don't
a friend
care
of a
what
friend
you
who had
gotta
an
say.
abortion.
You're
Well, just
literally
say, you're
like
gonna
sub
vote-
IQ in my mind.
You're gonna
Like,
vote people
Your
dismissing.
amount of reading people is at -20. You can't tell where I'm from by looking at me or checking my fucking.
And you don't know
Like,
anything
you
about me
can't
either.
even
So
think
why don't
in
we
your
just let that go?
brain.
Why
You're
don't we
such
just
a
let that
bougie
go?
You're gonna vote-
motherfucker. You probably learned all this in books. Like that's how much I
Oh
respect
no,
you.
reading books
Oh,
is
no.
gay.
My whole
Oh,
life has been
no.
so easy. Oh,
And by the
no.
way, I like lowered
fuck.
both your voices because like you're really fucking annoying to me. You can do the same to me. I don't give a shit. I still hear
Anyway,
you
so you're going
buzzing
about
really far
dismissing.
away.
You're going about you're going about
I don't give a shit,
people
Logan.
disrespecting.
Holy
Okay, well,
fuck.
let him talk.
Will
Let him
you
talk.
shut the
just
fuck
talked.
up?
You gotta let Kevin talk.
No, we're doing
Yeah,
therapy.
fucking
We're finished. It's
asshole.
therapy.
Just
We're doing group
fuck
therapy.
off.
Okay,
don't
please,
care.
please, everybody. Kevin.
Anyway, you're going about people disrespecting or disregarding your opinion, and then you say everyone here's a bougie motherfucker. You don't know any of us. Shut the fuck up. Jesus Christ.
Not everybody.
You
Definitely
literally
you
said
both.
you're all bougie motherfuckers. You literally said that.
Connor, when you said
comparison.
that these
Everyone that's
people
talking to me like that,
saying
yeah.
that when you said something about the left space having an opinion, like being not alive would be better. It would be better if my mom had an abortion. You were saying that exists in the left space. I agree with you. I thought it was kind of funny that you said that. But at the same time, I think that's a different strategy. Like when you talk about harm reduction, I'm going to pull this back to harm reduction really quick. When you talk about harm reduction, it's important to phrase everything that you want to logically think through as, okay, the most reasonable amount of harm that could happen to me, let's immediately bring that scale down. And so we're not really, when we talk about abortion, we're not really talking about the ills of the foster system. We're not really talking about grown people who aren't currently going through abortion. We're specifically talking about the ability of people who need abortions to get them or who want abortions to get them. So I don't necessarily, Malcolm, think that the addition of the ills of the foster care system and the obvious harm that it had on your friends necessarily is a great argument for abortion.
Well, I'm not talking specifically about my friends. I'm talking like statistically, like there's abuse, like 80% of people that grew up in foster care report abuse. Like these are undesirable circumstances, like going from family to family. Most of the time you're like in control of the state. Like these things are undesirable for most people. And if you, an individual, not at the state level, if you, an individual is like, damn, like I'm going to have this kid, I'm not going to be able to, afford to care for it or whatever, but I can't get an abortion. Contraceptive didn't work for me for whatever reason. And you end up having this kid. What are you going to do with it? You can't just like leave it on the side of the road. You're going to put it into the system. And the system has a lot of negative outcomes for a lot of people that go through it, and people that are still in it right now. And so like the outcome of the child is something that I take into consideration as well. Like what is the child's life going to look like if it is born? Like is this kid going to have an abusive family? Is this kid going to be in and out of the system? Is this kid going to have like a higher predilection of being abused because of where they're placed? Like so on and so forth. I think that factors into the decision as well as like a responsible parent where it's like, am I going to be able to provide for this kid? If I have it. And a tangential extension of this would be like if you were going to have a kid that was born, with a really severe disability, and it's like, fuck, there's going to be a ton of medical bills. This kid's going to be like in and out of hospitals its whole life. I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford this. I don't know if I'm going to be able to give it a good quality of life. You should be able to make that decision with an individual decision is not eugenics. If you say, fuck, I'm not going to be able to give this kid what it needs to have like a good quality of life, aborting it is probably the best option. So you don't have a kid that's like dying of Huntington's disease in the back of the car.
No, fuck that, Tosh. Fuck that, Tosh. No, I'm rolling this grenade your way. It's mine. So, no, as somebody who believes in systemic analysis, no, you're wrong. If you have a system that pushes a bunch of poor people and a bunch of poor whites and disproportionate black folk and disproportionate Hispanic folk, you can't just toss up your hands and say, oh, if we're just feeding babies to the fucking wood chipper, well, fuck it. That's better than being alive in a fucked up system. And by the way, there is not a single conservative in this fucking country who would literally pick non-existence over a shitty and traumatic childhood. There is no, like, as a matter of fact, this is the most like conservative shit that I've ever said on the fucking Hippy Dippy. This is like, there is no one on the right wing who would ever say painful existence is not preferable to non-existence totally. That's fucking lunacy from
I have to say,
the right wing.
This is going to make my skin crawl, but I kind of have to agree with counterpoints here, and that is a terrible state of affairs for everyone.
I mean, that's fine, but I mean, I'm saying if
the right wing, Kevin.
If you're gonna have a kid that's gonna have like fucking Huntington's disease, and have like paper fucking skin, like if you can't provide for that kid and it's gonna suffer, like I feel like I'm doing a harm if I bring a kid into the world that's gonna have like a horrible fucking quality of life. Like,
wait. Okay, Kevin, please finish.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I don't think it's a winning argument to be like actually to go to people who you're trying to convince of your political position and say actually non-existence is preferable. Because they're going to tell you to go fuck yourself. Like you're not. That's not a winning electoral or moral strategy.
I think even
if you think it's morally correct,
that's not what I'm concerned with. I'm concerned with like the probability of the best outcome for the child. That's something that I consider when I think about these kind of things. If you guys don't want to consider that, that's fine. But I think it's absolutely fucking insane to say that it's eugenics for somebody to be like, damn, I don't want my kid to have fucking like Huntington's disease. I'm going to abort it. And everybody's like, eugenics.
Choice.
It's going to die like the first year of its life anyway. Fuck.
The way Chapter described it was eugenics. I don't think individual choice is eugenics.
No, I'm talking about individual choice specifically.
Purifying populations of criminals and stuff is some Victorian. That is some mustache twirling madness.
It's not purifying populations. It's allowing people to choose when they have children. So, like, if you have a child, you want to be able to have the child in like the best circumstance you can, so you're not forced to raise a child when you're not able to.
And the
And
poor
I
will
think-
only raise criminals. You're correct. We need to kill them all, clearly.
Alternatively, modern humans
Clearly
can now
not
choose
about-
to never have children. You can now choose to never have any children.
make
Is
sure-
that, and I want to know, is that also, I'm sorry, Dylan.
Okay,
I think it's legitimate to choose never to have children. I think it's preferable if people in general do have children, but I think you have the right not to have children. Yeah, if that's your choice. Like ultimately, like the way that I fall on it is that like you should be able to choose when you have children, and if you want to have children, you should be able to have children, and if you want to delay when you have children, you should be able to do that as well. And it would be eugenics if you forced people who are like poor to not have children because you believe they have like inferior genes or something. That would be like a eugenics policy to like modify the genetic pool of the population. But obviously you're not forcing anyone to do anything.
Oh.
You're just allowing them like control of their own lives.
I know. Immediate rebuttal. Eugenics,
Okay.
good. So eugenics, life. No, this is fucking eugenics. It might not be systematized, but as somebody who thinks that people can be you could have racist systems without any racists. I think
Okay.
you can have eugenics.
Counterpoint. The problem with this definition of eugenics is that it becomes so encompassing to include like all laws. And let me give you an example
but
of that.
can I
Because
point out
listen
to you
listen to me.
that Malcolm
No,
was
let me-
talking about the good
Oh my
life,
God.
and he was saying
Let me
that
respond to
non-existence
this.
was
Oh my
preferable?
Let me respond to
so
this
obtuse.
counterpoint.
Holy shit.
The problem with this definition of eugenics is that it's so broad to include anything. So if you include if you give a certain population a UBI, that would be eugenics because they're probably going to be able to have more children, and therefore their
True.
genes are going to be more in the population. But it's silly. I know you're saying true.
We shouldn't
but,
we shouldn't encourage
that
the poor to
definition of
breed.
eugenics
Yeah,
is so absurd because
Okay,
every
actually-
law has knock-on effects way down the line.
Okay, so I rolled a couple of grenades your way, mostly for shitposty effect, but let me try to dial it back a little bit. Okay, the actual point is that this argument is insufficient, and from a conservative perspective, it's morally barbarous. So saying people just shouldn't have kids or they should be able to abort their kids so we don't have future criminals. I know that's not technically what you're saying, but that's what I'm hearing. That it's fucking monstrous. And then saying the system is fucked up, therefore non-existence is preferable to a fucked up life. That's also monstrously fucked up. Most conservatives particularly who are raised religious, they accept the fact that life is going to have a decent chunk of suffering, and that a lot of life is about facing suffering and finding meaning, purpose, love, joy, and all that kind of stuff in spite of suffering. So when leftoids bring up suffering as a reason to not exist, we're oh, well, we have two options here. Either we fight to get you to believe in life with suffering, or we just let you take yourselves out. And that, the second option is actually quite monstrous as well, because basically we're letting you kill your fucking selves. So, your choice. I've decided antinatalists can antinatal all the fuck they want. I don't give a shit. But, it's still fucked up and kind of monstrous. And
the statistics.
That's what I'm hearing.
And the
It's
statistics.
not what you're saying, but it's what I'm hearing.
And the statistics back up what Connor Points is saying. Even though we might not be intentionally saying you're not valid, you should die, right? By giving people this option to choose, the majority of the people or the majority of the statistics are following that same trend. It's people that are inner city, lower income levels, and of certain ethnic backgrounds. It's if you look at it from a certain perspective, it could be considered that.
Can I just say, I appreciate the Turk's very delicate use of wording there.
I got
Urban,
kids. I
lower
gotta be
income,
careful, man.
of a certain racial background.
No. What Connor
it's
was saying is
horrible.
poor white people are doing it too. It's
You
not
can't
one
force
size fit
black
all.
people to have children because you
It's
believe that they should have a greater representation in the population.
No,
Like,
they
I don't
should. That's
necessarily think that
And if we
should
ban
speak,
abortion,
any of us
they
should
will.
speak on the motherfucking black.
There will be more black people if we ban abortion. That is based and great.
yeah, that's how they outbreed
Not
the whites.
your
Yeah,
responsibility
let's go.
to determine how black families
Exactly.
reproduce.
Exactly.
That's the bottom line here.
They should be determining this.
And I want more babies to be growing up to vote in these different elections so that we can have a great society with less dead babies.
it should be up to Black families to
It's
choose
up to the
and to have
individuals.
their families.
Can we change the topic? Can we all agree that like birth control should be like way more accessible and potentially even free? Because especially like in Canada, birth control, most people don't know, but you gotta like pay for it. If here in Canada, like abortion is like free, basically it's included with all the taxes and everything you pay, shouldn't birth control should be given out for free to everybody and they can choose which one's better for them for free? And they like, why are
Yep.
we paying for birth control when like what the fuck? Like, it's way more traumatizing to get pregnant. Trust me, to get pregnant, to get to any amount and lose the clump of cells, okay? If that's what it is for you. Even if it's just a clump of cells for you, it's still kind of fucked up. You know, you're bleeding out. You need somebody to watch over you. You're falling out. You lack of energy. It can last for days. It's like salmonella, the type of pain you get when you lose that shit, even if when it's tiny. So I think birth control should be way more accessible and like free and really promoted to everybody. And I think if you believe it's a life and you don't want abortion, you should be on board with that.
I think that's a really good point because I think I mentioned earlier, but I'll mention it again. The same people who generally are in pro-life communities also advocate for abstinence only sex education, which leads to people not understanding how their bodies work or how they may or may not get pregnant in the first place. But also these communities restrict access to contraceptives, and that's super counterproductive to their end goal.
And a lot of
Okay.
evangelical Christians consider like contraceptives to be like a form of abortion anyway, because they think conception is like life or whatever.
Exactly. Life is stored in the balls. Jerking off should be illegal.
Amen.
Outrageous.
They get on a high horse.
Amen.
Do y'all really
True.
think? Do y'all really think the conservative people? Do y'all really think that it's like not morally okay to just choose to never have children, to like not contribute to that part of society? I'm confused.
You're free to
yeah.
choose to not have children. Yeah.
But do I think that's less preferable than contributing? Yeah, I do think it's less preferable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but
It's
it's
not
not.
a
But there's
Humanity-
plenty of
it's not-
people. You can. Sorry, go ahead.
It's not like humanity's running out of people. Like
You
the
say that
population
we're
of
at
the
like a
Earth is going
demographic
fucking
replacement
crazy.
rate of like 1.5 or some shit.
Well,
so
that's
we're about to
that's
crash.
America specifically, but yeah.
No, it's
Connor,
not.
you know
It's
what would
almost
be
the
fun to
entire
talk
planet.
about?
What?
No,
Is what would be fun to talk about is either the moral obligation or the moral non-obligation to take care of youth. I actually experience no drive to be a biological parent, but I think it's a moral obligation for me to someday have foster children.
Oh, I actually, this was one of my tangents, or going to be one of my tangents. I was going to say, if you choose to opt out, you can go into like your apartment and play video games and masturbate endlessly and fucking, I don't know, whatever the fuck you want to do. But it would be preferable to me if you did look at the next generation coming up and you said, hey, I had like a fucked up life. These are the things that went wrong. I want to make sure other people have a better life. Therefore, I'm going to contribute this to society. So even if you're not contributing genetically, you contribute in another way.
Human minds are assets.
Yeah, there are many ways you can contribute that does not include having biological children.
Yeah. And I prefer it. I prefer biological children basically from like a personal narrative story. Like literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people died so I could be here. You know, they survived like the freezing cold and food and deprivation and famine and probably some wars and some rape and some pillaging and all that kind of shit. And they all suffered so I could exist. So I want to pay that gift forward to like I want to pay it back to the people who struggle to survive on my behalf. And then I want to pay it forward to the next generation.
So you're just
And now we
cooking
have
yourself,
furries.
you're cooking yourself to thousands of dead generations you never met.
Yeah, of course.
Brilliant.
Like the social contract.
Like, civilization depends on having children.
Yeah,
If
there's
it's
also
going to continue.
there's a quote. There's a quote from Edmund Burke who's basically saying like the social contract theory is incomplete. The social contract is not just between a citizen and its society. It's between the living and the dead and those yet to be born. I think that's totally true.
Heard that, yeah.
Most people in any given society or demographic will choose to have biological children, but certainly for people who don't, that's still a valid option and they still can contribute positively to the group.
Of course, I don't like the fucking I know it's a meme, but I don't like the hedonism of like, I'm just going to go into my own quarter and play video games and jerk off and I'm not going to do shit and fuck y'all and you're fucking stupid for having a responsible normie life. I'm going to go be fucking neat over here and eat my chicken tendies and fucking do some meth while I'm playing League of Legends, you know?
That's exactly
I
what
would not advocate
progressives
for
are.
that either. That is not something that I would.
Exactly, but that's not.
Connor,
I mean,
that's
see,
not
that
the-
would be me if-
wait, stop. Connor, I will not
Yep.
have you bad talk half my audience, okay?
That sounds like a great activity after the abortion
Lay back
clinic
on
visit.
the meth. That's really the part.
You forgot to get an abortion in there. Get an abortion, get high on meth, play League of
Well,
Legends.
that's not
one.
the majority of people who don't have kids don't live that life either. That's you can
Well,
be a very
well-
productive and worthwhile member of society.
Well, you
They're like
fuckers.
soy bug
I'm-
men. They've got
I'm on
Funko Pop
Twitch.
protections instead of children.
I'm on Twitch and Twitter, and people are constantly posting these opinions. Am I not supposed to take these opinions seriously?
Not
Like,
really.
am I not supposed to take Twitch seriously?
Everything in
No.
moderation, Connor. A little bit of meth is okay. A little bit of meth is okay.
absolute pricks. Twitch is full of
Based.
the worst people on earth. Some of them watch
Damn.
Dylan Burns' channel. It's
Based.
embarrassing. What's wrong with these fucking people?
Oh, Connor's got to go and do meth and jerk off and play League of Legends.
That was
Based.
dedication. I
Nah,
wanted to ask
his
him,
He's
but
getting
wife
some
won't let him,
candies
dude.
right now.
Based.
Candies.
I would be a neat forever. I'm kind of a neat now, but if I could be a neat forever if there were no children in the foster care system who needed parents. Like, that's just to me a moral obligation of like, okay, I got to get my life together so I can like help the kids, help the old people. That just to me
That's
is,
a really good impulse because it's like a
Yeah.
duty to like community and to future generations,
Dylan,
and that's how
grab
we
Connor.
have good societies.
Oh, grab him? Okay.
Yeah.
True?
I just want to ask the Turk what he thinks about my take about the birth control being like free and accessible, like easily, so there'd be no abortion.
I mean,
As much
it
as
is
possible.
relatively accessible here in Texas. It's provided by the ACA that it has to be
No,
provided.
you're going in specifics, but like, what about it being like free and accessible to everybody? You don't like that, and why?
I
I think I know
think
your answer.
having it accessible would be a good thing. The matter of cost is always a sticking point for me as a fiscal conservative. But I think as accessible as it is today is not a bad thing.
But that's part of the problem with the fiscal conservative addition to that is that you want people to be born, but then as soon as they're born, fuck them, they're on their own.
We're gonna pay a lot more money in
would take-
welfare.
I'll take that argument.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of other programs that I would love to fund more. I would love to put additional funding into foster care homes. I would love to put additional funding into border processing so that we can have more asylees, more people coming in legally. There's a lot of other things that I would love to pour money into because I am a compassionate person and I want them to thrive and be alive here in the United States. But
that's
there's
not
also other programs that shouldn't be funded and we should stop wasting money over. So I don't disagree that having accessible birth control is a bad thing, but you know, it's like, okay, is having it funded through the ACA and requiring your employment to fund that is, I think that's a way to do it. I don't know if we want to debate that, but I think that's a thing that most conservatives would not have a problem with.
Wouldn't the employer be happy to give birth and control so their people don't get pregnant and have to take leave and maternity leave?
Yeah,
and
there's
all
perverse
that?
incentives there.
I mean,
Wouldn't that be good?
there's already laws and stuff that have requirements of like acceptable insurance stuff. So it's like, you know, there are ways to say that needs to be provided.
Well,
Also,
okay,
there
so
is- there's something
There are still
slightly
restrictions that prevent a decent amount of people from accessing it easily.
Yeah, we should fix that.
Well, we'll define
Absolutely,
Even
define
in Canada,
easy.
you have
Going-
to pay. If you're poor, like, and you're not on welfare, like, you have to pay. Like, if you're a single mom or whatever, and you're out working this job and that, and you're not on welfare, like, you got to pay, like, for your birth control. But most people don't know that. You got to.
So
pay
the
for your
question is
teeth.
then what
birth
is
control.
easy and what is too easy and what is not easy enough. All right. So it's, you know, if you go to the local CVS and you say you need birth control, the head pharmacist there is probably going to talk to you to the little booth or whatever and say, hey, how bad do you need it? Here's the program you need to apply for, sign this paperwork and it's paid for. And they hand it to you that day. It's like, it's not that it's not acceptable. There are easy hoops to jump through.
No, but like I guess
Identifying
I'm
more
saying
of
there's
an
some places where it's
issue-
not like that. Yeah.
more of an issue with an insurance sort of bureaucratic type of issue. Like,
that situation I just listed had
Yeah.
no insurance in it. You can the pharmacist has the ability to issue these things through public programs that provide for this kind of funding.
I see. I'm apparently not aware of that public program, or maybe it doesn't exist in Louisiana.
It's a state-by-state thing.
The way that I and most of my friends get birth control for free is through either Medicaid or Medicare, and then going to somewhere like Planned Parenthood or another clinic that offers free.
And Planned Parenthood could continue to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They could stay open and provide that service to the public.
Ultimately, the way to cut down on the number of abortions is to have A, proper education, and B, free and easy access to contraception. So you should have federal trucks full of condoms, and they're just throwing it out to people. Just fucking get as much contraception out there as possible. It's the
But
best
this was
way.
a victory for the white race,
The
Kevin.
education point is really important too, because just having access to it doesn't mean that people will be able to make the right choices for understanding which one might be the best for them. So I think they definitely need to go hand in hand.
We got to educate people on the importance of life and how hard it is to get pregnant and to get an abortion, even if you think you want one. When you get pregnant, you might change your mind, and that'll fuck you shit up because hormones will kick in and all that stuff. So, like, you really got to make... That's why my point was to say that it is murder. I didn't mean to cut you off, but to really put value on that, because that way people might be more careful. Like, as a young teenager, if you don't think about how hard it is to get one, you might not take it more lightly, like I did, so that's what I want.
Well, in true mama, just to modify your language a little bit, so there's something called homicide, and homicide is like the justified killing of another person. If nobody's like willing to embrace murder, it's because murder is like specifically the unjustifiable killing of somebody. But I do appreciate your general point.
True mama, I
like,
did try and
trying to put-
explain this before we got started, that the word murder is specifically an illegal killing. Well,
And I know
right.
I
So
too. I think using the word killing is the only real appropriate term. Murder is not
Yeah.
accurate.
Yeah, but then I also want to address this back to the Turk, where like, you're like, oh, well, as a conservative, I would love these certain social programs that would help out with people. And to address Kevin or whatever, I think the reason why this falls on deaf ears is because if you look at charities, like there's like shitloads of faith-based charities for, adoption and childhood planning and church shit and canned food drives and helping out poor people and all that kind of shit. But I do get that it's not enough. And then that's where I want to pivot right and throw a punch to the right. Basically, like, I hope Reaganism, like Reagan conservatism fucking dies. Like the rhetoric of the scariest thing you can hear is I'm here from the government and I'm here to help or whatever. That shit needs to die with the boomers, because the truth is I've been a part of public institutions, I've been a part of private institutions, and everybody's a fucking asshole. Okay, it doesn't matter if they're in private or public institutions. And if we actually want healthy, happy societies, if we want the positive eugenics that President Taftaj wants, then we have to have some level of redistributive economics in order to create happy, healthy societies. And so Reaganism needs to fucking die. So
true.
And one thing to add on to this, it's like I donate to all sorts of causes. I live my beliefs many times over. I wish as a society, y'all would enable people like me to provide more for these things, provide for better tax incentives, better all this other stuff, because if as a pro-life person, and we're going to outlaw abortion, I want to help solve this problem. Granted, there needs to be additional laws that go and fund this stuff, and there needs to be some deregulation in some instances, not in others. But it's like, as a society, we need to solve the problem of these babies being killed, and we need to provide for that solution and not just wave it off. I completely hear y'all saying, "Oh, we don't care about kids once they're born." It's like that's not a correct statement. That's just being radicalized.
So Counterpoint's argument was that boomer Reaganism needs to die, and your response was, we need tax cuts and deregulation, which is just more fucking Reaganism. That's what you've just described. More Reagan.
You completely glossed over I want to be able to donate more money instead of it being a tax cut.
I think what Connor's trying to get at is that or at least what I got from it is something that I think about a lot, which is that America has a propaganda problem. Not that it has too much propaganda, but that it has shitty, not enough propaganda. It's like how think of like, Jack in the Box, back before they started having the really funny ads with the live action Jack. Man, before that, Jack in the Box had fell off. That's America right now. Sorry, I'm getting really tired.
No,
so America fell off. we're not cool anymore. We don't have any government control over what people think is cool anymore. I can't think of another word besides cool. America is in its flop era.
Can I just say, has anyone considered
changing to the guard?
Has anyone considered ratioing America on Twitter? I think it's the only
True. Shoe on Head has ratioed President Biden several times.
True, but he doesn't even know what Twitter is, let's be honest. He has no idea what any of that is.
She ratioed some aid in the White House.
Yeah, but actually, I do think we do need a generational change into the guard. I'm hearing Xers and even boomers coming around on this where they're like, oh, oops, we did fuck up a little bit, and we do need young people to step up because basically, like, they're watching Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein. They're watching these people's brains fry live on television, and they're like, holy fuck, why are our leaders like what? Bernie Sanders, God love him, isn't he like fucking 76 at this point? And and people are still encouraging him to run. It's like, dude, you're 2 years past your fucking expiration date. Go sit on a fucking beach chair, take a fucking nap, and drink a lightly alcoholic beverage. Like, chill the fuck out.
I think it has to be said that we haven't even really touched on it at all. Joe Biden and the American federal government's response so far has been nothing short of fucking disgraceful. They've done nothing.
All they can do is nuke the filibuster.
They've done the liberal version of thoughts and prayers. Basically, you're on your own.
They're saying they're gonna do the abortions anyway, probably on federal land or something. I think
that would be good.
I think they just need more power. Like, if they're going to get abortion legislation pushed through, they can't do that with the filibuster.
I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying I think that's the last news I saw about it.
So I'm not sure they can do a lot, at least not in the way that progressives would want from them.
The only thing that I can think of is they can do a 51-49 split, basically nuke the filibuster, but if they create some kind of like exception or whatever, that can be capitalized on Republicans the second that they use it.
And Republicans are probably going to win big in the midterms.
We'll see. Roe versus Wade could blunt the momentum. But actually, what would be interesting is if they did that right now and then Republicans squeaked out a slim majority, then there's actually like a chance that the Republicans could do a federal abortion ban.
Yeah. And then everyone would be like, holy shit, what did the Democrats do here?
Yeah, and then they would lose the national election after. Sorry.
Every election that comes up, I feel like the narrative is and always has been, vote or die. We have to vote. It's so important. And it falls on deaf ears, I think, because we've been hearing it for so long. But I think that we need to change our messaging around this because it is crucial that people do get out and vote their opinions. It's the only way that we can really see what the general public wants. And so even though it feels exhaustive and it feels like, oh, maybe my vote's not going to matter, those are false narratives.
But this is my argument though. If Joe Biden's to go to the country, what is his selling point on this? He gets asked, what are you going to do about Roe versus Wade? What's your record on this? What does he tell to anyone?
I wrote a strongly worded letter.
He's done nothing. He's done fucking
AOC
nothing.
Does a lot. Recently, she's been posting a lot about how if the left does want to see a challenge to this, we need to hold our elected officials responsible in a very, very real way. And we need to let them know that our votes for them are under the expectation that they're going to act on our wishes.
Kind of like student loan debt, universal health care, minimum wage.
Like a lot of these issues that keep getting talked about.
Yeah, the Democrats are
being like
the Democrats are feckless bastards. Yeah, they don't do anything.
It's definitely it's time for accountability for sure.
They have control of both chambers in theory and the presidency, and yet they seem to have like 5% of the actual fucking power. It's embarrassing.
And we had a month's worth of warning on this too, and there wasn't really a lot of good planning or like coming together to kind of come up with like a.
Can I give you the real conspiracy theory?
Yeah,
Kamala Harris being interviewed, and she was like, "Well, what could we have done? You're the fucking vice president. You didn't have a plan for this. Like, what the? It's embarrassing. It genuinely is shocking."
So the real conspiracy theory is that it's like a fucking fundraising gimmick. Like, that's the fucking real conspiracy theory. Because like, it fucking happened. Dianne Feinstein, or I don't know. It wasn't Dianne. It was the other one. The other one that looks like a lizard. But like literally email out like
Pelosi.
This is anti-Semitism.
I think you mean Pelosi.
I hope she's not Jewish. Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah, I meant Nancy Pelosi, so hopefully she's not Jewish. I just meant that she looked like a lizard person.
Oh, so you hope she's not Jewish? It's just more anti-Semitism. It's outrageous.
Wait.
Absolutely terrible.
Well, it's okay.
Fucking
I
cancelled.
went after Taftosh for the eugenics. I guess I can take a little anti-Semitic heat tonight. That's fine. So the point that, like, you know, basically Democrats, if they actually won something, they would lose their reason for existence. So they kind of have to create like a perpetual crisis in order to continue to fundraise. I know that's like maybe college level freshman year fucking bullshit. I'm sure plenty of Democrats actually care about real policy, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, it does feel weak, doesn't it? That like literally the cornerstone of the Democratic Party was, we're the party of the minority, we're the party of women, we're the party of reproductive rights, we're the party of progressivism. And if I was going to say the repeal of the assault weapons ban was one of the libertarian achievements of the Republican Party, then Roe versus Wade was one of the crown jewels of the Democrat Party, and they just had it snatched from their fucking heads.
Well,
So-
can I just to counter that slightly, with a bit of whataboutism, I suppose. I think both parties do the thing that you've just outlined there of perpetual sort of drama for financial aid. The Republicans have done nothing but fundraise on the back of like scares about CRT and drag queens and fucking just Mr. Potato Head and just weird culture war shit for the last like 5 years. That's all they've done.
But default goes to the conservatives because all they're trying to do is conserve the status quo. So if they scaremonger, maintain the status quo, that's not half as hard as putting forward a positive vision. And if anything, there's literally like a 2-hour conversation that Taftosh and I had where I was like, where's the positive vision for the right? If we don't figure this out, then we're going to be dominated by Christian nationalists and ethno-nationalists and fucking all that kind of shit. We have to have like a coherent vision for the right, and this is the one thing the left beats us on. And Taftosh still hasn't gotten back to me, so she.
Can I just say, I don't know why you're using
not a great beginning to her presidency.
I don't know why you're using the future tense there, as if republicanism isn't run by those very same people right now.
In reference to what?
You said that if we don't come up with X, Y, and Z, they're going to dominate us. They already do.
Oh, well, I'm
In
expecting
the
the pendulum.
future.
Yeah, I'm expecting the pendulum. I'm expecting that this was probably the biggest achievement of the American right wing for the next decade. And what's going to happen is it will probably take a decade for the left to swing everything back their way. But at the end of that decade, if Republicans or rightoids don't have an answer for what a positive future of the country looks like, we're going to be fucked. Because basically, if you're talking about like demography, like mild racism towards Hispanic people is probably untenable, considering immigration trends. Christian theocracy is probably not tenable because of the increasing secularization of the planet. Global warming or climate catastrophe is probably not tenable if we don't come up with technological solutions that actually like mitigate the consequences of CO2 production. So all of these things will come to a head within a generation. And if we don't have an answer, we're fucked.
It's a real shame then that the same Supreme Court just ruled that the EPA can't even do shit about it. Like they're just going to let the planet fry. Yeah.
No, the EPA can regulate the emissions process. They cannot say that there's certain standards other than that they can do.
I think
so
that
they've been
there's
neutered. Yeah.
I think there's also another option, which is that the pendulum is kind of like horseshoe theory, and it may not really exist, or it may not exist in all cases. And so the pendulum may never swing back. And the fact that a lot of ethno-nationalists are currently in the right wing, and especially in Trump's right wing, could mean that that entire part of the quote-unquote right wing could dissolve. And it could become something either much worse, or it could cease to exist.
Before this,
there's a lot of Hispanics.
And there's a lot of time between now and then.
Yeah, we're also getting a little bit off topic from what we were actually
that's
supposed
true.
to be discussing
Sorry.
right now. We're talking about the future of the Republican Party.
Well, I can tie it back in. I can say that my unaborted kids are going to be of voting age when this pendulum swings back. So I'm doing my part.
Yeah,
to
left
progress.
race.
Oh,
yeah, I'm doing my
Where's
part.
your kids?
I'm doing my part.
They're all
to
aborted.
progress
They're
the
all
right-
aborted.
right
Kids
agenda.
are probably going to be
Leftists
left wing
don't
when they're
wanna have
18.
Kids. They just
No.
want to be able to choose
Turks
how
kids.
and when they do it.
Yeah.
No,
Turks
it's
kids are
called
gonna be
raising your
communists.
kids with respect and treating them as human beings and not trying to shove down agendas.
So they're Maoists.
Well, true. But
Yeah,
I think
there's
that's
hormones.
bullshit. I think that's
Hormones
bullshit.
Kids
I
can
think
go
that
around-
I think you always have to shove your bullshit down a kid's throat. Like that's
No, you don't.
parenting.
No, you don't.
No, actually, so this is something that I want to shout out to the conservatives or the rightoids. Like, we all do propaganda. We all make choices about the moral messaging that we send to our kids. And even if you like look at like American achievements, like the space race or World War II or some shit, there was always like, you know, pro-ally, pro-Western propaganda. It's just whether or not your propaganda is advocating
Can I just
something
say,
good.
America didn't win the fucking space race. They got to the moon first, and that's it. Russia beat you to everything else. The idea that America
Not
won
true.
the space
Have
race is
they made it to
fucking
the moon in the
embarrassing.
past
true.
50 years? Like they've had 50 years. What have they done since?
They had an international space station 20 years before you did.
Who was on the moon?
International?
Well, off topic again.
I
Listen,
cannot
I
bring
can talk
this
shit
back.
about the
I can't
Russians.
bring it back.
I'm
That's
gonna
it.
was being
we gotta
influenced.
get off the space race thing. The Americans won. We all agree. Who's next in the discussion? Or should we start wrapping up? We've been going for a while.
Yuri Gagarin was from Utah, wasn't he? I remember.
Yeah.
Nobody knows who that person is outside of like Russian nerds. Therefore, we won. So
First man in space. I
everybody
think.
knows
True.
Neil Armstrong.
True. Just
Yeah,
I'm just
right.
saying, Soviet dogs beat you into space. I'm just
And
saying.
then died.
There's
Yeah,
suicide
and then
bombers.
died.
Yeah, this is that's
Now.
their version of a suicide bomber. They
Soviets
murdered a
The dog
aborted
should have been
the
aborted.
dogs
Applauded?
in space.
Oh, if
The
I,
dog
wait,
should have
wait,
been aborted.
Kevin,
It
if
wouldn't have
I
died in
go
space.
out back and I shoot a dog and kill that dog, I go to jail. Soviets get a round of applause for some reason.
American shuttles were blowing up in the 80s. Fucking hell.
Yeah, but
like,
Americans can sign contracts and agree to
intentionally.
it. That's a dog. You can't do that.
How'd you know? You have no idea of the contract negotiations between Leica and the Soviet government. You have no idea.
That is true. I don't know the specifics, but
Come on, man.
I doubt the dogs. I doubt the dog consented. Oh, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, Dylan, I'm just speaking for me. My thing is like the left is fucked. Y'all got a decade to figure it out when it comes to abortion. You're going to have to get your shit together because Twitter is not going to like if Twitter's any indication of what's like the future of democratic politics in the United States, then you guys are pretty fucked. Some of this shit is fucked up. Some of it's defensible. And then some of the arguments that are made are absolutely morally abhorrent. But I also understand like the utilitarian calculus of Taftaj's eugenics. So that's kind of me.
Can I just
wrapping
point
up
back? Because
what
this
I
was the thing
understand
that
from
you mentioned earlier about the popularity contest. Again,
Mhm.
nationwide, Democrats get more votes than Republicans consistently. It's just the weird system of the Electoral College and 2 senators per state. Which
do you know what
is
your
an inbuilt
chances of
right-wing
repealing the
fucking-
Electoral College or the Second
but
Amendment
that's
are?
the
They're
point.
fucking
You
goose
say
eggs.
the
This
left
shit's
is
code.
fucked. It's because the system's shit. It's not because people
Okay,
don't
well,
vote for
you
those
shouldn't have
things.
agreed to it 300 years ago. You're fucked.
Well,
So,
I didn't.
you know.
He
I
didn't.
was-
He lost though.
I was
so
wearing a
maybe-
red
Yeah, I was about to
coat at the
say
time.
you
It's fine.
you
Y'all
made a,
lost.
a geopolitical mistake of being born in the wrong fucking country. So like that's like what are you going to do? So for instance, like as a matter of fact, this is a perfect. So Dylan, it's related to the original topic by talking about the political path forward for Democrats to get legislation in on a federal level in order to enshrine abortion rights across the United States, or to push back culturally and on the states level where they get it through the state legislatures.
Mhm.
Okay, so I want to address Kevin.
I like how you had
full-throatedly.
to justify your breaking of the rules. Like I know I'm gonna break the rules, but let me just reel it in somehow.
Listen, I'm tying it.
Therefore, I'll allow it.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's all a circle. So Kevin, like this, if y'all are tweeting that shit in fucking 10 years, then that's gonna suck because basically, like the Electoral College is the Electoral College. The chances of it being repealed within the next decade or probably within the next century is almost zero. Same thing with the Second Amendment. So you can fucking piss and moan about it, but if it doesn't change shit, then you're wasting political energy that could be spent on other things that might be more productive.
Well, no,
so you're
I'm
like
not-
the game is rigged. Oh,
No,
okay,
no,
so
no,
it's
my-
rigged. So
my
how are you going to
point
play the game to win?
My point wasn't about playing the game. My point was rather more to push back on the idea that the left is fucked or the right is winning the popularity contest. It isn't true. It's just
Yeah,
not-
I think the
it's
left
fundamentally
is
not
winning
true.
the popularity contest for sure. I also don't really buy this. The
By-
left is like very effective in a lot
by
of
raw
ways.
right
numbers,
now.
yes.
But Connor's talking about in like 10 years when the pendulum swings back. What I
Well,
was just
he's
writing
saying
down
that
is
it's gonna
that
I think it's
swing
swinging
left,
now.
the
right?
left is currently vocalized by these whiny responsibility of orders. I'm not saying that's the majority. I'm saying it's vocalized by them. And that's what Connor's talking about reading on Twitter and shit. So
Yeah.
if those people are still tweeting that in 10 years, then that means that we are still avoiding responsibilities like what the trad shit that Connor is trying to conserve as a conservative, which is things like building families and building future generations.
Hey,
More
Connor,
white babies.
I have a question for
Like
you.
Tata
Do you
said.
think that the pendulum is going to swing left or right? Because I thought you were saying it was going to swing left.
No, I'm saying it's swinging right, and I'm saying it's swinging right
okay.
now. So
Yeah,
what I mean by that is, it seems like the lefty culture war shit dominated, and the most like crazy response that the right wing had was on YouTube. That's what it felt like for the past like 5-10 years. But Trump was a manifestation of real right-wing power, actually got the Supreme Court nominees into the thing. Mitch McConnell navigated that entire situation, very Machiavellian. And as a result, we now have a conservative majority on the Supreme Court. So the question is, are Democrats and are leftists, leftoids, progressives, liberals, are they smart enough to re-maneuver back where they can see social power? And then is the right, so I kind of agree with you that the left is very powerful in a cultural sense, where a majority of the media that you consume is going to be left, center, liberal, or progressive. But at the same time, I also see like very aggressive rejection of that culture. And I'm kind of wondering is that going to blossom and grow, or is that going to kind of
because I thought you were saying the opposite, and I was like, I don't know if I agree, but I agree. I think we are seeing a pendulum swing to the right, especially around a lot of the left wing like cultural dominance. You see certain left wing ideas which were able to blossom and grow within like very left-wing circles, especially university system, but weren't like really effectively challenged. And so once they got like exposed to the public, they got like sort of torn apart. Like I think critical race theory is a good example of this, where it wasn't effectively challenged.
Did I just stumble into a PragerU video? What the fuck is going on?
Yeah, so that and also like trans stuff. I think the left-wing people have like really pushed trans stuff to probably ridiculous levels, and we're going to see swing back on that. I also think geopolitically, I think America's going to regain a lot of confidence as you know, Russia and China both like fail to achieve certain strategic goals. America's probably going to see itself as more dominant and therefore less self-critical.
Oh yeah, so I was gonna say I want to give a conciliatory branch to the left though, because like one of the jokes is that like you know, well actually it's not even a joke, it's just true at this point. At the right wing now, and the right wing in a couple of years is going to be like, I'm not transphobic, I have a trans friend, and look at my trans conservative pundit. And like, I'm not kidding, that not only is we already know this. We have like Blair White.
Are you saying that Taftage might be a useful idiot for the right then?
No, she's a useful genius for the right. That's what I'm saying.
Exactly, because I'm going to make sure that they actually were brought to a reasonable middle ground where the right is.
No, in 10 years,
can I say I have a bunch of super
they're still going to be calling you a groomer. They'll all still be calling you a groomer.
No. Actually,
I don't interact with those people.
Yeah, I was actually about to say
but
I have a bunch of
the laws. It's not a matter of you interacting personally with them.
Supporting them, so I don't know how I'm like helping them.
Okay, so I just want to make one joke. There's a bunch of super straight people in my chat, and they all say that Taftage has them questioning. Okay,
my one joke is that if we trans every child, there will be no abortion. So maybe we should look into that.
Well, I was about to say when the pendulum swings back, and America gets its first Antifa president, then the forced feminizations begin. Okay.
Yeah.
I can't fucking wait.
Dope.
Okay, well, maybe chill out with that on Twitter, because basically, just to point out the
world doesn't
rhetoric
exist on Twitter.
Go outside.
Okay,
go outside,
okay, but
Connor.
it does exist on Facebook, because what happens is your shit is screenshotted.
Tell that to your mainstream media that Twitter is not a legit news source and that they need to stop looking at it. That way, it's cut off at the source.
Facebook.
Okay,
none of this just have to wait for Elon Musk to take it over and
go
drive
to
it. Oh my god!
Then. Go to CNN.com and you'll see a bunch of articles that have tweets
about
on them.
Tweets.
Within the first two paragraphs, you'll see a tweet by some prominent liberal or progressive person.
Yeah, lazy journalists doing lazy journalism.
Okay, Kevin.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's
Kevin.
Legitimate news sources.
By the way,
Rail in it.
They don't. They don't.
I'll reel it in. I'll reel it in. So
okay.
Okay, no. Okay, so
how long is he gonna go?
No, stop.
How long is he gonna go?
Stop.
Fucking hell.
Counter.
Turk, you.
I'm gonna mute you all. Okay. We live in peace and harmony. Okay. We've been going on this for about 2.5 hours. My question is, do you guys want to end anytime soon, or do you want to go for the full 3.5 hours on this? Because I feel like
Release us, Father.
I think like we've probably been through enough that we could start to look towards ending this.
Yeah, once we started getting onto the space race, it went a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've
I
sort of
ask
hit
if
all of
anyone
the
wants to like
relevant-
join me and continue talking. I'm going to continue streaming, so
Okay.
I'm down to continue talking. But yeah, Hippy Dippy is kind of going off the rails.
It is going off the rails. And so I want to give everybody a chance to wrap up and go their separate ways. So we're going to start wrapping up with counterpoints, wrap up the topic, and give yourself a shout out.
Okay. So I reject this assertion that Twitter isn't a real place. I do believe that it's the most hyperbolic, vicious, aggressive, shitty place on the planet, but I still think it's a real place. And there's a propagandistic edge to this that you need to be aware of. The most hyperbolic, shitty, leftoid fucking tweets are screenshotted with and without their likes. They are, and if they go viral, then that's even worse. And they're put in Facebook groups to say, oh, look at the leftoids. They're all fucking insane and they want to groom your kids and murder them and blah, 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 blah. And on top of that, they are featured on like the most viewed cable news program in the country right now. So maybe like start treating it like it's a real place, like these are your genuine opinions. When it comes to the actual topic, I kind of said what I already said, which is rightoids are probably going to overcommit. They're going to fuck some shit up. They're going to create a backlash. Leftoids are going to come back. I don't know if leftoids are competent enough to achieve a comeback, and we'll see how it kind of goes. If you're interested in any of the shitposts or memes that I posted tonight, and or you're interested in Warhammer 40,000, which is a science fiction universe that's hyper violent and super fun, then typing counterpoints common spelling into YouTube, or just check me out on Twitch at _counterpoints_. You'll find me in both places, and we just broke 25K on YouTube, so it's a good time in my neck of the woods. So I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. It was fun. And I'll probably hang out for a little bit longer with Toph.
Okay. I'm now going to throw it over to Johnny.
Hello, you guys. Thank you guys so much for this panel. This was really fun. If you've never seen me before, hello, my name is Johnny Scarlett, also known as Johnny. I am an educational variety streamer right here on Twitch. We talk about everything from philosophy to art to math to science. That's about it for me. And yeah, thanks Dylan, thanks everybody. I don't think that there's anything that we haven't covered, by the way. We got all the way to the space race. Closing statements are fucked.
Kevin?
Yes, hello there. I'm Kevin Logan. You can find me at KFLogan1875 here on Twitch and on Twitter and YouTube and all those places. In terms of wrapping up the topic, bodily autonomy is massively important. People having the right to Medicare, to their own medical care and their own decisions is hugely important. The decision by the Supreme Court is shoddy as fuck, based on not on real law, but on religious doctrine. Frankly, I personally think that America is headed down a really difficult and bad path. Given this and several other decisions by the Supreme Court, including allowing people, public employees, to engage in religious guided fucking nonsense, that the football coach on the halfway line, all of that shit, the reduction of EPA rules, etc., etc. America is in a really bad place, and something vastly important needs to happen. And unfortunately, the person at the helm is unsuited to doing anything remotely radical, so nothing's gonna fucking change. Doom pill out.
Madam?
Thanks. To wrap up the subject, I do acknowledge that Roe was built on shaky ground and as bad law. However, in the same vein, this decision is also bad and will have a lot of dangerous consequences. I think it's important for all of us to acknowledge that the majority of Americans do support safe and legal abortion, at least up to some point. And if we can focus on finding legislation that is representative of the majority and can represent a compromise, well, neither on the extreme end are going to be happy. That's what's in the best interest of all of us overall. As for me personally, I am a sex-positive feminist liberal. I'm also a sex worker. I do some politics streams in relation to human rights, women's issues, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also online in non-political ways, and you can find me on Twitch twitch.tv/Madam Genevieve or Twitter, Madam_Genevieve, and I'll put those in the chat.
GDI, Malcolm?
I am goddammit Malcolm on everything. I mostly talk about trans stuff from like a trans masculine perspective. I do all trans masculine / all trans panels every other Monday. So I know that there's a few transgenders lurking. You're free to participate if you want to. And I enjoyed this conversation. I'm chill to talk more in depth with anybody at any time if they wish. Kind of wrapping up the topic, I think that it all comes down to like an issue of bodily autonomy for me and like the best outcomes for like the mom, the family, and the child as well. And I think that kind of this precedent, like I said at the beginning, is kind of scary to kind of revisit past things that are kind of, kind of like a precedent, and kind of revisiting them and unearthing them is something that is kind of scary, especially with considering like the gay marriage being discussed in the opinion and so on and so forth. The other thing I wanted to share is that trans masculine people can still get pregnant on testosterone. So if you're a trans guy out there and you're on T, you can still get knocked up. So be careful with that. And finally, I know that I kind of opened this saying that I was Catholic. I never said that I was a good Catholic, but I am in fact Catholic. So take that as you will. And I appreciate everybody's time. And I had a good time. Thanks everybody for contributing and chatting. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Taftaj.
Yeah, Taftaj. I post sexy pictures online and have political discussions where I have incredibly harsh, intense eugenics takes, like that poor people should be able to choose when they have children. So if you want like more super controversial stuff like that, definitely follow me.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Turk.
Yeah, I'm Turk. I do science and tech stuff, so I appreciate being on the panel. Glad we could have some good conversation. I actually agreed with points that Scarlett and Genevieve had, and Logan, I appreciate the feedback. But I gotta say, Malcolm, if you're gonna call yourself a Catholic and not adhere to the catechism, and you're gonna not adhere to anything that your denomination of the faith adheres to, you are not a Catholic, my friend. You are a not Catholic. So sorry, man.
Fucking Protestant.
I'll detransition from Catholicism right now. Thank you for changing my mind. Amen.
This man's
Blessed and
used his
based.
whole closing statement to tell him he's not Catholic.
I'm going to throw it over to True.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm sorry I'm not trained in these anymore. I used to be a lot more less emotional and all that, but it's an emotional topic for me. It's a lot easier to get through to 3 months pregnant than you would think, the way they count it. So that's why I think birth control is really important, no matter what. Because even if you don't think you want a kid by 3 months, when you sometimes if you're stressed and you're in denial and all this shit, anyways, whatever. I'm not getting into it, but just be careful, everybody. And thanks for having me. You can find me on Twitter, Twitch, and most every social media you can think of. So look me up. And I'm happy to have met everybody and to have got to hang out. I'll probably hang out with Taj if you guys keep talking, but I need to take my dog out real quick. So
Okay. You guys all have a good one. Thank you so much for coming on this Friday for another edition of the Hippy Dippy Roundtable. I'm going to go pass out now. You all have a good one.
Thanks, Dylan.
Hey, buddy.
Later.